we in 1 minute we will get started, everyone. Welcome. This is Chief Andrew Booth from Bath PD. I'm the co-chair of Maine Council for Elder Abuse Prevention. My other co-chair is Jill Randall from Legal Services for Maine Elders. In another minute, we're going to get started, and we're going to lead off with a welcome remarks from Jane Margison from AARP Maine. So stand by at 9:01. Jane, take it away.
Good morning, all. It's 9:01, and I was instructed to get started right on time by none other than Chief Andrew Booth. So we are off to the races. Good morning. I'm Jane Margison. I'm the AARP Maine Senior Communications Director, and welcome to the Maine Council for Elder Abuse Prevention's 12th Elder Abuse Summit, the 12th. Thank you for joining us to learn about preventing, identifying, and responding to elder abuse. We often say that elder abuse is a community problem with a community solution. Your involvement matters in the prevention of the devastating and life-threatening problem of elder abuse. Elder abuse can take many forms, and so a multidisciplinary response is needed. So everyone in the room today plays an important role to prevent, identify, and respond to elder abuse. So that we all learn a little bit about who is in the room today, I know that we have many different experience levels. Can you please raise your hand if you have been in this field for more than 10 years? That's fabulous. Thank you. And please raise your hand if you've been in this field for more than 5 years. Thank you. And one more if you've been in this field for more than 1 year. Thank you very much. Now we see how much we come together with so many disciplines and such dedication. Thank you, Maine Credit Union League, for tech support for today's Elder Abuse Summit. Throughout the program, please put any questions you may have in the chat, including general questions about the program, any tech questions that you have, or questions for our speakers. You should have gotten a message that we are recording today's program, and it will be posted on the Maine Council for Elder Abuse Prevention's website. This program has been approved for a total of 5 CLEs for attorneys over both days. And if you would like us to report your attendance to the board, please email Jill Randall, and Jill is going to put her email into the chat for us. For other disciplines, we will provide certificates of attendance and ask that you seek approval with your licensing authority. In addition, evaluations will be collected for each presentation, and we ask that you please complete them each time. These evaluations are very important and affect our planning for future summits. It is truly an honor to be with all of you today. Looking around this virtual room, I am struck by the depth of commitment, expertise, and compassion represented here. Each of you has chosen work that isn't always easy, but it matters deeply. We all come to this summit from different roles and disciplines. Some of us work in prevention, others in response, policy, advocacy, healthcare, law enforcement, or direct services. Our day-to-day work may look different, but at the core, we are united by the same purpose, protecting older Mainers and ensuring that they are treated with respect, dignity, and care. Elder abuse doesn't exist in silos, and neither can our solutions. No single organization or sector can do this work alone. It takes all of us working together, sharing knowledge, strengthening partnerships, and showing up for one another to truly make a difference. When we collaborate, we are stronger, more effective, and better equipped to meet the complex challenges older adults face. Together, we help ensure that older Mainers across our state are safe in their homes and communities. Together, we help make sure they live with dignity and independence. And together, we send a clear message. They are not alone, they are valued, and we have their backs. Thank you for the work you do every day and for being here today committed to learning, connecting, and moving this work forward. It is a privilege to stand with you in this shared effort for Maine's older adults. I'm now pleased to introduce our first speakers, Donna Brown and Alin Pardilla from the Wabanaki Women's Coalition. For more detailed information on the summit speakers, please see the bios that were emailed to you. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to you, Donna and Alin. Thank you.
Good morning, Donna. We just got a great introduction. I think you just popped on. I will let my executive director, Donna Brown, start us off. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Brown. I am the executive director of the Wabanaki Women's Coalition. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for inviting us to share this time and this space with all of you this morning. I am assuming that the coordinators have enabled share screening. So I will go ahead and start with the PowerPoint presentation and the information that Alin and myself will be sharing with all of you today. Like I had mentioned, I am the executive director. I have been with the Wabanaki Women's Coalition since October of 2017, first starting out as the outreach coordinator and then being promoted to executive director in 2021 with the retirement of our founding director, Jane Root. Shortly thereafter, approximately a year later, we hired Alin Pardilla as our replacement of an outreach coordinator, and she was promoted to assistant director almost 2 years ago. So, and I will turn it over to Alin for her, or Alin, did you share your introduction already? Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to keep it short and sweet because I think we have bios. So I'm the assistant director. My name is Lynn Pardilla. I'm the assistant director of the Wabanaki Women's Coalition. I've been with the coalition almost 4 years now, and I will previously to that, I was an advocate at the Penobscot Nation Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Advocacy Center as an advocate and also a shelter coordinator for close to 8 years. So I don't know, bio. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes, and I just want to share with everybody that what we will be sharing with you today is based on our lived experience and experience in the work that we have done working with tribal elders, not representing on behalf of any tribe specifically, but we are here on behalf of the Wabanaki Women's Coalition. And for myself, my experience comes from being a former research assistant, as well as shelter aide and adult case manager and wellness court case manager. So in all of those respective positions, having the opportunity to work with tribal elders, and then, of course, sharing the research that pertains to what we'll be covering today. And I do want to also thank everybody and acknowledge the expertise here in the room today. So therefore, our presentation does not focus in depth on the various types of elder abuse. However, we will be touching briefly on different types of cultural and spiritual abuse today. And with that, I will go ahead and share my screen so that I can bring up this PowerPoint. So our objectives for today, we'll be covering various community resources, sharing with all of you some important cultural awareness when working with tribal elders, some culturally specific considerations when working with survivors of elder abuse, benefits of working with a Wabanaki advocate, some statistics of elder abuse in Indian country, as well as statistics of domestic and sexual violence for all people in Indian country, some legal supports for Wabanaki elders, and how to build a bridge for services and partnerships. So our mission can be found on our website, WabanakiWomen'sCoalition.org. But our mission is to increase the capacity of tribal communities to respond to domestic and sexual violence and influence tribal, national, and regional systems to increase awareness, safety, justice, and healing for all our relations. So our coalition has been in existence since 2013. We are considered a dual tribal coalition, and we are one of 21 tribal coalitions in the nation. So our state of Maine is very fortunate in the regard that we do have a tribal coalition, and also for the fact that we have a domestic and sexual violence advocacy center in each of our 5 Wabanaki tribal communities. Also, our communities also provide domestic and sexual violence shelter for survivors. Again, we are very fortunate to have these culturally specific resources, knowing that there are approximately 50 tribal shelters in the nation. Considering we have approximately 574 federally recognized tribes, do the math. That is a very small percentage of shelters that we have in the nation, culturally specific, serving tribal survivors of domestic and sexual violence, sex trafficking, stalking, and dating violence. So here we have a map of our Wabanaki tribes. We have photos of our current tribal chiefs in all of our Wabanaki communities. So we have Chief Sheila McCormick to the far left. We have Chief Clarissa Sabatis in the center. Sheila is the chief of Mi'kmaq Nation, located in Aroostook County, formerly the Aroostook Band of Mi'kmaq Indians. And Clarissa is the chief of the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians, also located in Aroostook County. We have Chief Kirk Francis, top far right of the Penobscot Nation. And we have Chief Buzz Bassett of the Passamaquoddy tribe at Pleasant Point, or Zabayik is the traditional name of the community. And then we have Chief Bill William Nicholas from the Indian Township Passamaquoddy, or Medukmiguk. Now on our map here, which is also on our website, you can see the location of our tribes within Maine and how vastly separated or spread out they are throughout the territory, which is traditional Wabanaki territory throughout the entire state of Maine, far reaching into across the border into Canada, the Maritimes, as well as south of Maine. We also have a listing here that you can look at our website for the contact information for each of our domestic and sexual violence advocacy centers for our communities. So covering some of the supportive services specifically in Wabanaki communities before we start moving into the various types of elder abuse within Native nations. We just want to make sure and mention, of course, our Wabanaki Women's Coalition and our member programs. These 5 advocacy centers are considered member programs, very similarly to MICASA and MCEDV. How they have their member programs. So we provide as coalition that direct technical assistance, training, and support for our advocacy centers. We also provide various other forms of support with quarterly affinity meetings. We have weekly Zoom meetings with our advocates. We have an annual survivors retreat that we organize each year for survivors of domestic and sexual violence, really tying into the mission of the healing of our tribal communities. So we also, again, have each center listed as well as their hotline number. They each operate a 24/7 hotline. So people can call if they're experiencing any form of the abuse that we cover in our advocacy centers, or concerned family members, or just looking for resources. So here we have a list of each tribal nation and their website. So we highly encourage, if you are, working with an elder that's from a specific community, to outreach that community first. Especially taking into consideration jurisdiction, legal issues, access to specific resources in that community, and in each of the respective websites will generally include a list of the resources that are available. I want to point out, for the 574 federally recognized tribes, including the tribes within our Wabanaki territory, each nation is different in terms of the history, the values, some practices, and especially resources. So there may be, similarities amongst our communities, but it's also important to note that we are distinct nations. So being familiar with the community, being familiar with the history of the community, especially if you are working directly for the community, is very crucial. And of course, the resources in each of the community. Some additional Native specific resources that are available through Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness. They operate a hotline as well called the Wabanaki Care Line, a toll-free number that you or a survivor may call for information and resources. We also have the Strong Hearts Native Helpline. This is a helpline that is specific for Native people of abuse that they can call. It's now a 24/7 hotline. And I want to also mention the importance of culturally specific resources, because a few years ago, prior to becoming a 24/7 hotline, Strong Hearts Native Helpline conducted a study, a one-year study, and because they were in operation till 10 p.m. every night, they tracked the amount of calls that were dropped for individuals who called after 10 p.m. What would happen is those calls would be automatically routed to the national hotline. And what they discovered was that 100% of the calls were dropped, which really spoke to the importance of having culturally specific resources. So we are thankful they are 24/7 now. We also have the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition, and they are one of the 21 tribal coalitions as well, but they are also a dedicated technical assistance provider for the Office on Violence Against Women, which is the department that we are 100% funded by. We also have the Alliance of Tribal Coalitions to End Violence, which is a great resource. They also, on their website, have a large amount of resources available for people, and they are the official TA provider for all tribal coalitions. And then we also have the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, also known as NIWRC. Again, a great resource for tribal people or people working with Natives. So we want to talk a little bit about cultural awareness in Wabanaki communities, and I'll start and hand it over to Alin. As I had mentioned earlier, it is really important when working with Native people to have some sort of cultural awareness in general, to be familiar with some of the cultural practices, terminology, so that when you are working with that individual, and in this case elder, we want to make sure that they are comfortable knowing that you have this awareness. And I want to start off first and foremost with language, because language really matters when working in our Native communities. So I know that there's a common usage of terminology to older adults, and there's various terms that are used in mainstream society. But I will say that in Native communities, um, the term elder is held in high regard, and there's a very known, you know, realization of what comes with that name or term referring to our older adults in our communities as elders. First and foremost, there's a high degree of respect with that term that we use, how we refer to them as elders. So not only the respect, but also being aware that being an elder comes with wisdom. Oftentimes, elders in our communities, they are the language keepers. They are also the history keepers. They know in depth our families, our clans, our connections. They can provide some knowledge to us in terms of navigating and understanding and working within our communities. And so, there is that awareness there in the term elder. Now, is also the term elderly, and sometimes that can have, a negative connotation with some folks. But I just want to, distinctly differentiate between an elder and being elderly, because being elderly, sometimes we think, that a person has limited capacity, whether it's limited physical or mental capacity, maybe financial. But again, and this is not just within our Wabanaki nations. This is widespread throughout tribes throughout the United States and Canada. I'm also from a tribe in Canada, as well as the Penobscot Nation. So the research shows, far and wide, this is the term. So when working with colleagues or working with elders themselves, or other colleagues and other, maybe in tribes, referring to them as elder is the most beneficial way and respectful way when communicating with colleagues and directly with elders. Also, too, want to talk about just the environment when visiting an elder's home. If you are, tasked with that, whether it's, to do a home visit, maybe your responsibility is conducting an investigation in that elder's home. So some things to take into consideration when in an elder's presence or in their home. If they invite you to have, a beverage or maybe some food to eat in their home, accept the food, accept the beverage. That's shown as showing them a sign of respect, and go ahead and do that. Please do not feel awkward or that you're taking advantage of that elder. It's very common practice when someone enters the home. Even if it is a worker, even if it is a stranger that they've never met, to offer something to them. I myself often travel with a bottle of water, a container of water. And if an elder were to offer me, say, some tea, rather than say, no, it's okay, no, thank you, I brought some water with me, I would accept that tea. Also, some other suggestions when visiting an elder in their home is that, and this is most likely a common practice in any home, but if that elder is seated, sit down and have that eye level conversation to face that elder, and really be present. I know oftentimes, we have many things that are scheduled on our agenda for the day. But if you are, responsible for doing a wellness check or an investigation, to really carve out ample time to meet with that elder, to be present, not distracted, on your phone, or keep clipboards and excessive paperwork out of the view when initially, entering the room and meeting with them. And giving them time, it's really important, especially if they're meeting for the first time, because we'll talk about some barriers to working with elders, and some challenges, and how to overcome them. And one of the greatest ways is to be present. Another thing too is not to interrupt the elder when they are speaking. So allowing ample time for those pauses, and allowing them to say what they have to say. And it may take some time. I know, as I mentioned earlier, being a former research assistant, we had to go door to door and interview various homes, and many of them, elders lived in those homes. And, some of those interviews could take 15 minutes and some of them could take 2 hours. And so knowing that, it's very important to be present and listen. Alin, did you have any other suggestions for cultural awareness in Wabanaki communities?
So it's really common. So there's some statistics on what a traditional family sort of looks like in some communities, not all communities, but oftentimes you'll see multi generations living together. So if you are visiting someone, whether it's a well check or visiting with someone for any type of other services, there may be children present a lot. I think there was a statistic that was like 10 points. I think it's like around 10% of elders are in the Indigenous community are actually primary caregivers for their grandchildren. So don't be surprised if there are children and maybe even grandchildren living in the home with an elder. And I resonate with a lot of what Donna has said as well. Speaking to building that trust within our community and with our elders is really, really important. And that's sort of the first step of trust when they're kind of gauging, opening up the conversation. And this goes for, I think, a lot of individuals is to take that first step of eating or sharing a beverage with an individual and then proceeding from there. And then I would also bring up something so when Donna said to consider each tribe separately and each cultural and spiritual practices separately, I just wanted to also mention that there may be certain medicines around. And when I say medicines, I'm just talking about the medicines that I'm aware of and that I practice with and within the tribal context that I know. And this changes from tribe to tribe as well. So if you see like tobacco, loose tobacco pouches, there might be some sweet grass, there might be some cedar, there might be sage burning. That in some tribes and in some cultural practices, that is something that they use to practice their culture. And so I just wanted to mention that for people that might be like, oh, that's interesting. Like what are they burning in their house? What are they, there might be loose tobacco around. And some individuals use that for multiple different purposes, for healing purposes, for cleansing purposes, for prayer purposes. And I am not an expert in this field. And if you wanted that information, I would encourage you to go to the tribe that you are working with that individual. And most tribes will have a cultural expert that you can actually speak with and learn from. And I would encourage you to go to them. They are the knowledge keepers of that tribe and what specifically practices are for that tribe.
Thank you, Ellen, for that. And yes, you may smell the scent of some of the medicines they may have smudged with that day. So rather than walking in like, what is that? In a curious kind of way, just be aware, that it could happen. They may have smudge that day. They may have their smudge bowl there, or an eagle feather present that we often use to smudge with. So just being aware of those things. And I also, when I mentioned earlier about language and terminology, because sometimes people wonder, like, how should we refer to people who are Indigenous, who are Native? Do we refer to them as Native Americans, American Indians, their tribe? So it is best practice to refer to an individual specifically by their tribe. If you know what tribe they are from, or they know what tribe they are from, because some were adopted out decades ago and were displaced from the community. But if they do know, that would be best practice. So working with somebody in our Wabanaki communities, just being aware, are they Passamaquoddy? Are they Maliseet, Penobscot, Mi'kmaq? And there may be natives, that you work with that are not part of, a Wabanaki tribe, but a tribe located elsewhere. So being familiar with that tribe, asking the questions will certainly help. So there is a term, American Indian, that is used by the federal government, and we often use the term Indian country. That is an actual term by the federal government referring to the federally recognized tribes within the United States, excluding Alaska. So those tribes in Alaska are referred to as Alaskan Natives. But that terminology of Indian country is specifically to the reservations within the United States. So if you hear us use that term Indian country, that's where that terminology comes from. It's also important to know in terms of cultural awareness too, is that, approximately 70% now of Native Americans do not live on reservations. They are referred to as urban natives. Whether or not they live in an urban setting, they may live in a rural setting, but approximately 70%. And that is pretty close for the statistics in our Wabanaki communities. I know for Penobscot Nation, we have a population of approximately 2,500, and 70%, again, approximately, live outside of Indian Island, outside of the reservation. Another thing to consider too, with cultural awareness, is that some Native elders, they may not have been, born and raised on the reservation. They may have lived outside of the reservation, but as they came into their retirement years and looking to where they want to settle down for their remaining years, there's been an insurgence of those people returning to the reservation for that connectedness. And so that's another thing to take into consideration, because that elder, they may or may not have been raised in the culture or at various levels. So there may be a great need within them to really connect with the cultural resources, the ceremonies within the communities. So some other culturally specific considerations when working with survivors of elder abuse. Alin mentioned earlier about, the likelihood that it can be possible that there may be adult children and or grandchildren living with the elder. Something important to keep in mind, oftentimes, and like we mentioned, each community is different, each reservation is different, but there is, a likelihood that there is a shortage of housing within that tribal community. So that obviously affects, the likelihood of an elder having adult children living with them and or grandchildren. And it may simply be a matter of just combining resources too, and having that option to live out their remaining years within their home. So those adult children and grandchildren may be helping that elder to achieve that ability to remain in their home. For myself, my grandmother in Canada in the later years of her life, my father lived with her for a while. My sister lived with her as well, another cousin. The family all just worked together to meet her needs and what she wanted in her later life. Ellen, did you have anything else to add?
I would also say, so when we talk about elder abuse, it comes in all forms. So it could come in physical, emotional, sexual, financial. It could even come in self-neglect. And when we also consider in our Indigenous communities, spiritual is a pretty big one in our community as well that can be affected. And what that sort of looks like can vary from community to community. But it could be elders not being allowed to attend a ceremony. It could be them not being allowed to practice their language. It could be they are not allowed to use those medicines, so they're not allowed to practice their culture. They're not allowed to hold on to their regalia. And for those that don't know what a regalia means, that is usually their ceremonial outfits, or that sometimes they will wear it for certain occasions as well. And oftentimes those can be handed down from generation to generation and have very significant meaning to individuals. And I would also include a form of abuse in there that oftentimes I think, when we talk about emotional abuse and mental abuse, when we talk about name calling and when we talk about the aggressive words that are used against individuals. I would also include slurs in there, racial slurs towards our elders as well as a form of abuse to consider when working with our elders.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of regalia, if you're wondering what this picture consists of, these are some of the women from one of our annual survivors retreats. And we made shawls that weekend. So we took a group photo, but shawls are just one type of regalia that women may wear at social gatherings, otherwise known as powwows, socials. They may use them in ceremony. So just being aware of that. And I also, when I talked about language earlier, it's really important to note the language that we use when talking with an elder if we are suspecting elder abuse. There's been various studies conducted on the language that is used when working to obtain information from them. And what these studies showed was that when individuals met with an elder and they asked them, did you experience physical abuse? Did you experience emotional abuse? Oftentimes they would say no. But if they asked them, have you been disrespected? Have you ever been disrespected? Are you being disrespected now in your home? Then that would elicit a response from that elder. And they would say yes. And then it's up to the person who's there to meet with the elder to then ask the probing questions. And the most in-depth response that people will often receive is the type of response from an elder that is more like telling a story of what they experienced. So if an elder says, yes, I'm being disrespected, then for the person to then respond and to ask the questions. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? And then they start to talk and then ask the questions, are you experiencing things like the types of harms, that Alin mentioned yesterday, the various types of abuse, is anybody, causing physical harm or name calling and things like that. So just asking those probing questions after the fact. A lot of you are mandated reporters. So being transparent, early on, like you would do with any person, making that known. But then when you're ready to ask the question, are you being disrespected? That opens up the possibility for disclosure and more in depth. Now, again, taken into consideration, they tell it from a story of their current experience and or past experience. That's why it's important to carve out that time, because that elder may start talking about life, in their younger years, and may start disclosing maybe abuse that they experienced as a child or a teenager, and then lead up to what's currently, being experienced. So it's developing that trust, wondering if you are going to be there to listen to them, and that they feel comfortable talking with you. Also,
Another,
oh,
oh, sorry. I was just going to say another common term that elders will often use is bothered. So somebody bothered me, particularly around sexual types of abuse. So they'll typically say, this isn't, and again, I'm not speaking for all, but they'll typically kind of refer to it as being bothered. And so I would encourage people to kind of try to probe around, like what Donna was saying, ask a few clarifying questions, just kind of try to get at what that exactly means for that elder. What does bothered mean? And then another one would be to be aware of that particular tribe's sort of slang terminology. So often, sometimes they will use their language or maybe even slang to refer to their body parts. So each tribe is going to be different with what that might be. I can speak to the Penobscot Nation tribe just very briefly, like a couple slang words that I had come into contact with that when I was working as an advocate. So like check-in is a slang term for butt. So they're really learning sort of what that means, or if you don't know, if they use a name that you're not sure what that name means. And I'm sure most of you already know this and would ask questions to clarify it. But I just didn't want people to be surprised if they use, a different word that you're kind of like, I've never heard that word before, and I can't really hash out what that would mean. And then I would also say, working, within the tribal communities, some communities are very large land-wise, but Indigenous communities can also be extremely small. So people know each other. So keeping like confidentiality when it can be used, understanding that some people are mandated reporters and there are individuals who are, APS reporters. So understanding that, but confidentiality is huge, and maintaining that confidentiality in our small communities, especially for elders, is typically very important to them. So when they're working with and they're building that trust up with individuals, they really want to make sure that their business isn't out there for others, because it's very common for people to know what's going on within small communities. So if it's possible to meet with individuals outside the community, or if it has to be within the community, just being aware of what that might look like.
Yes, thank you, Lynn. Yes, and that was another term that the research has found is most beneficial when inquiring about sexual abuse or sexual assault of an elder. Again, straight up asking them, are you being sexually abused, sexually assaulted? Would often not elicit a response or confirmation from the elder, but using the terminology, are you being bothered? And then if they were experiencing that abuse, they would divulge that information, and then for the individual to ask those probing questions. Just being, knowledgeable about culture and, things that we are currently experiencing in present day society with Native communities. A good example is the timing, right? Individually for that elder. Is it a good time of day to visit that elder? We would do that with any person that we were visiting, and then also to the timing of the community. So some communities have different feasts and different ceremonies at different months of the year. I, being a former consultant for the Hopi tribe, for their tribal court, they had ceremonies almost every month, and we had to know when we could schedule appointments. And it was all, centered around the timing of their ceremonies. Another thing I experienced working for the Hopi tribe, and I had never seen this before, and it goes to show each tribe is different. But there is no clear, definitive age of what constitutes an elder. For Indian Health Services, which many of our tribes have health centers in our community, there's a certain age that qualifies you as an elder for specific services. For within each tribe, sometimes it's 50 years old or 55. And then we know for the federal government, for Medicaid and things like that, there's a certain age. So it doesn't necessarily go by age. And when I worked at Hopi, I had to organize an elders specific committee for consultation. And our first meeting, there were all these elders in this room, and this younger gentleman was in the group, and so in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, they specially invited this person because he's from the cultural department. But then when they went around and introduced themselves, and the head of the group introduced this individual as Elder so and so, and he had to have been in his late 20s, but he was raised in such a traditional way. And he was the head of the cultural department. The vast majority of the time that he spent, his personal time, his professional time, it was always with the elders. And so the elders in the community and the rest of the community viewed him as an elder. And so I just want to share that with you, because even myself being Native, to be in their community and to experience that, that was definitely new for me, and eye-opening to show that communities can, while we have a lot of similarities, we can have some very considerable differences too. Another thing, oh, go ahead, Ellen.
I just wanted to add two more words, like for definitions that you might come across. And one of them would be, so when you're talking about the abuser or somebody who might be abusing them, sometimes individuals will refer to them as a wrongdoer. How that person, is a wrongdoer, or they'll throw a term sort of similar to that, instead of using the term abuser. And another one was, so in retrospect to partners, so some people call them their friend. I've run across this often as an advocate, is some individuals don't feel comfortable referring to their intimate partner as a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or and they'll say, oh, that's my friend. And for whatever reason, that's a term that they will often use. And so I just wanted to put that term out there as well for individuals to consider, and to not just sometimes take it at face value, because that's what I would do if somebody said, oh, that's my friend. I'd be like, okay, friend, but there might be more to that, and there's a lot of different reasons why individuals use that term, whether it's a safety concern or whether it's that's what they feel comfortable using. So I would also encourage individuals, if you have an inkling of that, to kind of ask and clarify, what kind of friend is this? And that might help you as well if you're working with someone.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ellen. Another thing, I'm wearing red today. I have what's called red dress earrings on. Today is May 5th. the national date of recognition for our missing and murdered Indigenous women. That's initially how it was founded, now more representative of all people. So MMIP, missing and murdered Indigenous people. We have high rates of missing and murdered individuals throughout Indian country. So May 5th, today, may not be a good time to visit with an elder or somebody in a tribal community, knowing that we're all in, solidarity, recognition of the loss of people in our communities. So just being aware of that and other things that may be going on within our respective communities. When working with survivors of elder abuse, some of the common things or forms of abuse that our elders experience typically, and this is based on studies, hundreds of tribes studied on what are the more common tactics. What are we seeing, in our elders' homes, and this abuse may occur in the home. It may occur if they're living in someone else's home, whether it's a nursing home. But regardless, the abuse that they tend to experience more frequently, in addition to domestic or physical abuse, sexual violence, would be financial abuse or financial exploitation. We mentioned earlier that survivors or current victims of elder abuse may have family members living with them. They may not be exploiting them, or they may be. And so for those instances, what is typically found is that there may be adult children, grandchildren who move into the elder's home without their permission. They may have their own children, the grandchildren, living in the home using the elder's resources, and the elder may have limited resources to begin with. They may leave the children, the grandchildren, with the elder without asking if it's okay, or for extended periods of time. So that elder may be responsible for not only temporarily housing the grandchildren, but clothing and feeding them. They may not have assistance with basic chores within the house. So they're literally responsible for everything, not only for themselves, but also for the grandchildren. And other ways of abuse, there may be other people. It may not just be a direct family member. It could be the partner of an adult child or the partner of one of the grandchildren also moving into the home. So there's, the wide variety of, we often ask who's being abused and who are the abusers, right? Who are the ones doing harm? It may be somebody, within their family, or it may be an outside person as well. So benefits of working with a Wabanaki advocate, I will turn that over to you, Ellen.
Thank you. So benefits of working with a Wabanaki advocate. So all of our advocacy centers, as Donna had previously spoken about before, have a hotline, a 24/7 hotline. And all of the centers, the hotline is an actual person will pick up the hotline. So some hotlines, I know you can call and you have to leave our message, and it's a callback number. Every single DVSA center in the Wabanaki community, except for Peaceful Relations, which is in Sebaik, Pleasant Point, has a actual person that will answer it. So you call them at 2 a.m., they will answer it. And so I think that is a great resource for individuals if you're looking for either the individual to call, or if you as a service provider have questions and maybe are looking for services for somebody that you might be working with. I encourage you to use that hotline as a tool. And additionally, some of the services that our centers can offer, once there's an intake done, they could offer safety planning, they can offer shelter. All of our centers currently have a DV shelter, a domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy shelter. They service individuals for domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, sex trafficking, dating violence, and 2 service for elder abuse specifically that isn't related to domestic violence, but all service elder abuse that's related to any of the other abuses that I just have mentioned. And they also they can do shelter, they have transitional housing, they have funding to help with a phone, with food, clothing, gas, transportation, assistance with court proceedings. So if there's a PFA or a protection from abuse order or a protection from harassment order. And additionally, they know a lot of the services inside and out for that particular reservation. So if you have, this is why Donna had mentioned before, if you have, I want to say survivor, sorry, so that's like in our world, but if you have a client or a survivor or an elder that you're working with, and they are from a particular community, why it's great to reach out to that community is they'll know what's available for assistance for like HUD, if they have any housing assistance that might help with building a ramp or changing locks or getting cameras to make certain things more secure for elders. They also have knowledge on what is available at their IHS, if it has dental, counseling, what the wait list looks like for healthcare, what healthcare is available. If there's an elder advocate specifically that is outside the DVSA program, there might be an elder advocate within the community that can help them with other services, help them filling out certain paperwork or obtaining other services through the tribe. They will know for tribal courts. So we'll get to another slide that incorporates what services there might be for tribal courts. And if there's LIHEAP that the tribe offers, if there's any sort of other services, if there's a food pantry, what other services might be available, those Wabanaki advocates are going to know what's available in their community for that survivor. And that's just a very brief list of what they do, but there's a lot more that they do that I definitely did not cover, but those are a few off the top of my head.
Thank you, Lynn. And also, each tribe is different in terms of the various departments and resources that they offer. But some ways, very common ways that tribes will work to be proactive to prevent abuse, committed against elders would be, there's cases where certain police departments may do, annual checks with elders, and it may be at certain times of the year. They may appear, prior to Christmas and offer them a little gift and meet with them and talk with them, or any other specific time of the year. Many IHS clinics, their doctors or nurses will do home visits with elders, especially if they are actually homebound, case managers as well. Many have what's called an elder advocate, and that specifically usually falls within the Department of Social Services or any specific elder program in the community. Many tribes have what's called an elders council. So a group of elders, and some of them are actually part of a tribal council. They may be considered a more traditional council. Tribal governments can look very differently from tribe to tribe. And also too, many tribes have what we call elders meals. So one or more times a week, there's a certain place in the community where meals are provided for elders, and it's an opportunity for them to have that socialization, be connected, and then also for individuals that provide those direct services to also meet with them and talk with them and basically have eyes on and just make sure that they're there. So if that elder has any questions, any concerns, they have the safe people that they can go to. Many of them take trips together, so they fundraise throughout the year and they go on, annual, semi-annual trips. So really working to increase the socialization, keeping in mind, the isolation, whether it's, emotional isolation, or literally, that physical distance, from their home, and their nearest neighbor or their community, can have an impact of how safe or how much access they have to the resources. So Lynn mentioned the
I,
transportation, which is another important part of that.
I did want to mention one more thing super quick though, because I want to be wary of time. That there is, if there is an individual that is extensive, that you are concerned about with abuse towards an elder, and there are other additional resources that you could. So each tribe in Wabanaki territory has a different way of doing things. So I would definitely check with that Wabanaki advocate on how to go about doing it. But some tribes offer bannings for individuals, especially individuals that are not from that tribe. And so if there's somebody within that home, or if there's somebody that's causing extensive damage, they actually have a process where they can ban that individual from being in that home or even being within the community. And so I just wanted to offer that is an additional protection, that if that feels like a good resource or if that wouldn't do more harm than good. And each situation, I'm sure, will be different. So figuring that out will be important, but that's something that is available in pretty much every single community. It's just a different way about different way to go about doing it. And when that isn't established and in place, if that individual does come out within the reservation or within the home on the territory, that individual will be removed by police. And so there is some follow up with teeth to that. So that individual could potentially get a criminal charge if they continue to trespass after that.
Yes, so we also talked about the benefits of having an advocate, ways that survivors may present or talk about sexual assault. We pretty much covered that, and what we can do to support the whole person or the family. So just keep in mind, oftentimes elders who experience any form of abuse, they may not necessarily want that family member prosecuted in a court to receive any type of fine or jail time. A lot of times, like other survivors, they just want the abuse to stop. They want the person to get help. And so talking with that survivor and seeing, what they want, what they would like to see. Sometimes, elders, they'll say, I just want them to get help. If their loved one is experiencing addiction issues, or maybe, that family member is, living in the home but not contributing, they're unemployed. And so sometimes case managers, elder advocates, they'll work with the elder and the family to create a plan, basically to support the elder to establish boundaries and timelines of, when they determine that their family members either need to leave the home, or if they are to remain in the home, what does that look like?
And I will add that when working with a Wabanaki advocate, a majority of our Wabanaki advocates are tribal themselves, typically within that community or a sister community within the Wabanaki territory. So they may be able to actually give you some insight if there is releases signed on sort of the dynamics of that family, and might be able to help you navigate that a little bit better of like, oh, I can tell you like the dynamic in like that, if there's like a friend, or if there's if there are other individuals involved, they might be able to help give a little bit more clarity and be a little bit more open than maybe the survivor might be, or might be able to help you kind of ask the right questions, or guide you to kind of ask the right questions on how to figure a couple things out.
Yes. So, statistics of elder abuse in Indian country. there are no real specific statistics, and there is a great need for that. What we do have, and I think it's in a further slide. Yes, it is here. We have from Dr. Rose, which is a researcher who conducted this study, and it was released by the National Institute of Justice, and it's called Violence Against American Indian and Alaska Native Women and Men, released in 2012. So you can research this national study. It's the most recent and in depth in terms of statistics of natives, and this is all adult, not just elders, who have experienced abuse, and particularly this slide references sexual violence. So 56.1% of women, 27.5% of men have experienced sexual violence, more than half in their lifetime. And this is by the federal government, and it states in this study, they are the racial group most likely to be raped in the US. So just knowing the high statistics of sexual violence in the United States experienced by Native Americans, we are the highest racial group to experience rape in this country. So, looking at, or taking into consideration what the elder may have experienced for individual trauma, and maybe it's trauma that they may have experienced throughout their lifetime. Maybe it just wasn't just one incident, as well as taking into consideration the history of the tribe and what that tribe may have experienced historically. So there's many factors that contribute to the present day's experience of that elder.
I did want to add that there is a couple statistics. One's from the Indian Health Services Center, and it was a rather small pool of population. I think it was around 300 people that they were surveyed for. But it did state that 1 in 3 elders reported emotional, physical, sexual, and this isn't interesting when we talk about language, maltreatment. So when we talk about language and how that matters, that's what they identified it as. So emotional, physical, or sexual maltreatment in the past year, or financial abuse by a family member. And this study was done in 2020. So they said 1 in 3. That's how they reported it, was the maltreatment, and then they used which form of abuse before. And then the other was from NRC, so it's National Resource Center on Native Americans and Aging. And the statistics on this resource site is from 2017 to 2020. And they said that 1 in 3 Native elders reported being disabled. So I think that that's also a very important thing to consider when working with our communities, is that is something that was being reported as well. So I just wanted to add those 2 things.
Thank you. Yes. And so this next slide here, it's titled A Broken Trust, Sexual Assault on Tribal Lands. You can Google this, search in YouTube. It's available for free. It's about 50 minutes. I highly encourage you to watch this video on your own time to get a better sense of what Native people have experienced and continue to experience in regards to sexual assault. Disproportionate impact, you touched on the disabilities, Alin, thank you, and adults in later life. 1 in 10 over the age of 60 will be victims of abuse by a caregiver or family member. And they are less likely to report sexual abuse. Domestic violence statistics for Indigenous people, 80% of women will experience violence in their lifetime, 50% of men, 66% of Indigenous women have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner, and 75% of Indigenous men have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner. So again, very high statistics of physical violence, domestic violence in Native communities. Barriers why people...
I can cover this, Donna, if you'd like. Do you want me to cover this slide? I said I can cover this slide if you'd like.
Sure.
So some of the barriers are inadequate medical care. So we talk about Indian Health Services that are available. with Indian Health Services, they will provide primary care doctors, dental, mental health counseling, and it changes from tribe to tribe as well. But oftentimes it will be a revolving. The doctors are not always there, so it's changing a lot. So we get a lot of new doctors in, so there's not always consistent primary care physicians that are available. So oftentimes elders will have to retell their story again, or they'll have to look back in the chart or remind individuals. So sometimes there can be a little bit of like loopholes or lack of congruent healthcare that's being provided. And also lack of sexual assault forensic nurses. A lot of that we are working on right now, trying to work with UNE SANE program on that, and getting into more individuals that are available, especially at IHS clinics, for an option for survivors and elders to be able to access a lot easier, because that transportation piece is very huge. Our IHS clinics are often located on the reservations of that tribe, and so it's oftentimes easier to get to those than hospitals or that it may be off. And then the other one's fear of retaliation. We talked about small communities and mistrust of systems and lack of justice.
I think we have 5 more minutes remaining. I know when we were scheduling, it said 9:15 to 10:15. I hope that's still the correct time, but we have a few more minutes to get through the remaining slides. Legal supports for Wabanaki elders. Lynn touched on this earlier. We have tribal courts in all of our 5 Wabanaki nations. Some have been in existence for longer amounts of time and may cover more types of cases than others, but we do have tribal courts in each community. And I know Alin will touch a little bit on this slide as well in regards to VAWA and full faith.
Yeah. So there, any protection from abuse orders or any court orders that are obtained within tribal courts are full faith and credit, meaning that they can be used in the state of Maine anywhere outside of the state of Maine. They hold the same weight as a court order from any district court, any other court within the state of Maine. And so I just wanted to touch a little briefly upon some tribal courts. So any individual from the tribe, so I can speak to Penobscot Nation because I know that the best, and I'll just use that as an example. So if there was an elder that was looking for a protection from abuse order or protection from harassment order, they can obtain that court order. They have a right to go to the Penobscot Nation Tribal Court, even if they do not reside on the Penobscot Nation. As long as they are on the census, they have a right to obtaining a protection order from the tribe and with the tribe. So the abuse does not have to take place on the reservation, and they do not necessarily have to live on the reservation. If they're fleeing to the reservation, that is something that they can obtain. And if you kind of need more guidance around that, please reach out to a Wabanaki advocate, or please feel free to reach out to me. We also have a recording that is very lovely of our Judge Manhart from Penobscot Nation, who explains this much better detail than I just did. And I just wanted to point out that a lot of the tribal courts also have elder abuse codes. So looking and being aware of those may also provide added protections for people that you might be working with. And oftentimes each tribe may be different on how they go about it, but oftentimes the tribes can also act as a third party invested persons in cases of adult protection services. And so they can, similar to sort of child protection services, they can step in as a third interested party of their citizen. So if there's something that is going on, that is another way that you might be able to obtain services and added resources for individuals. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Thank you, Lynn. So building a bridge for services and partnerships. This is today one good example of building a bridge, just being familiar with some of the organizations, some of the individuals that work directly with survivors, that provide that direct service or work in collaboration with them. We referenced earlier, each individual tribal's website, as well as the Advocacy Center, but there are a host of departments for each respective tribe that provides some sort of service to our tribal elders. So being familiar and just reaching out and feeling comfortable to do so is part of our intention of being here today. So once this concludes, if you need, send us an email, give us a call. If you have a particular question, we'd be more than happy to assist you and lead you in the right direction if you have any further questions or need a particular resource. And just, putting a face to a name, we always say is very important. If you have an opportunity to visit a reservation, a great time to do that each year is during what we call our Wabanaki Community Days. We often hold a social or a powwow during that time, and they are open to the public. They often have native artists and vendors there, food vendors, and it's a day of celebration for our tribal communities to celebrate our culture, to be together, really show that resiliency and celebrate the beauty of our culture and our communities. So that's a great opportunity to just be familiar with, the culture. It's a weekend of drumming and singing and dancing. We often hold a large health fair as well as other fun activities throughout the entire weekend. And those are typically held within the months of August and September in each of our communities. And so, if there's an interest for yourself and your department, maybe you want to get to know some of the advocates that work in our communities. Contact Alin or myself, and we'd be happy to invite you to one of our weekly Tuesday Advocate Zoom meetings, where we'd love to have you join us and again put a face to a name and just learn about more in depth of what your organization provides and what we provide as well. So that's an opportunity. Alin, did you have anything to share for that?
I don't. Thank you for having us. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, or even if you're not sure how to ask, please feel free to email. I know sometimes that's hard to just ask certain questions and you're unsure of how to go about it. But I think if you're leading in a good way, I think it's great when you try to educate yourself on certain things and asking other partners versus the people that we work with. So yeah, definitely open to that. Please reach out.
Yeah. So these, what that may look like in terms of working with survivors of abuse, very similar to any survivor. So just some helpful suggestions here as well on this slide. We also talked about building the safe relationships with advocacy centers, be a safe person that they can talk to, connect survivors and families to essential hotlines and other resources available. And just to be a bridge, this is a photo of the bridge leading onto Indian Island. Just a great analogy and of what we all strive to do collectively amongst our various organizations in different ways. And here is our contact information, Alin's email address and cell number, and my email address and cell number as well.
All right, folks, it is 10:30, and I would like to introduce the next half hour's speakers, Angela Hamlin and Simon Byrne from Legal Services for Maine Elders. They were going to talk about fact and fiction on surrogate decision-making in Maine. Take it away, Simon and Angela.
Good morning. How's our audio? Good.
Sounds good to me.
All right. And I'm hoping you guys can see our PowerPoint. Very good. So this morning we're going to talk about surrogate decision making, which is basically when someone else makes decisions when you can't, and the different tools that you have available, both public and private. And So the first thing I'll do quickly here is tell you about what the next half an hour is going to look like. We'll quickly tell you about LSE. You probably know about legal services for Maine elders, but we're going to tell you about us anyway. And then I'm going to actually show you a couple maps real quick. And then we'll talk about financial powers of attorney, advanced directives, guardianship and conservatorship, talk about a little bit of our work with APS, and then have a little bit of time for questions.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Simon Byrne. I'm a staff attorney at Legal Services for Maine Elders. Before I start, we encourage questions. I don't know how best to facilitate that, maybe through the chat with somebody like Jill or Chief Booth monitoring it and bringing it to our attention. Please interrupt us in real time. Okay, so we'll start off with a description of Legal Services for Maine Elders, or LSE. What is LSE? First of all, we're a private nonprofit. We are not a state agency. Oftentimes folks think that we're associated with the state. We're not. We're a private nonprofit. We were established in 1974. We have three front-facing, what I'll call units. We've got the Medicare Part D unit, which is our unit that helps folks when they're having issues with their prescription drug coverage. The second unit is our helpline paralegals and helpline attorneys. All of our cases, our legal cases, start through the helpline. It's how we do our conflict checks, and it's how we assign cases to staff attorneys. And the third unit is the staff attorneys and the staff attorney paralegal. Let me back up on how cases come to us. A potential client calls our 800 number, the helpline, and then our intake paralegal will do intake with them. And then a helpline attorney will call that person back and discuss their issue. If it's an issue that can be resolved over the phone or with some quick writing for the helpline attorney, then so be it. That's what will happen. But if not, and it's a type of case that we handle, the case will get assigned to a staff attorney, such as myself or Angela. Who are our clients? Well, to be eligible for our services, just two things need to be in play. One, you need to be 60 or older. And the other is that you need to be a Maine resident. Fairly simple. And to be clear, there's no income or asset limit on our services. What legal services do we provide? Essentially, it's services that address basic human needs. So we're talking about food issues, such as public benefit issues with SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps, or seeking general assistance from the local municipality. Housing is a big issue, obviously, not just because of the lack of it, but we handle matters that foreclosure. So we're talking about bank foreclosures or municipal foreclosures when you fail to pay your property taxes or clean up your yard. Still in the housing issue realm, we deal with habitability issues and accessibility issues. Habitability is when you rent a place, the landlord has a legal duty to make sure that it's safe. And sometimes, unfortunately, that duty is not honored. For example, mold is a big problem that we see regularly. Accessibility, that's about folks that need certain access, different access due to a disability that's often required by the landlord, and the landlord doesn't require it, so we'll get involved with that. Utilities, this is all but, I mean, this is primarily heating assistance issues. So you apply for HEAP and you get denied, or you don't get as much as you're expecting, and we can help out with that. Health and safety, that's a big one. As the previous presenters mentioned, protection from abuse and protection from harassment orders is something that we can get involved with when a client is facing abuse or harassment from a loved one or someone they live with or a neighbor or an interested party, etc. Still in health and safety, we deal with Maine care appeals and issues involving health care to be provided to a certain person. If that health care is terminated or the amount of hours pertaining to that healthcare service is reduced, we can step in and help the person who needs that healthcare. We can help them try to get it through administrative law matters and hearings. Income, we deal with income, so this is all things Social Security, retirement, SSDI, SSI, plus debt collection issues. That's a big topic, debt collection issues that stays solely on the helpline for the helpline attorneys to tackle. They're very knowledgeable on all things legal, but debt collection is something that they're very good at helping folks with over the phone when they're being chased down by creditors and harassed. And then lastly, the matters or issues we involve ourselves with or services we provide our clients is what I'll call the classic elder abuse issues, neglect, isolation, withholding food or medicine. Although I should say that with those three specific issues or sub-issues of elder abuse, Adult Protective Services is often more heavily involved in those matters than we are, but we do work collaboratively with them, which Angela will discuss later. A few more types of what I dubbed the classic elder abuse. We've got the physical and verbal abuse, as already addressed with the protection orders. And then sort of the big one that I see in the news most frequently, which is financial exploitation. When a client is taken advantage of and money is stolen, real estate is stolen, we get involved in those matters. And I'll close with this slide, just by saying I'm going to be talking about powers of attorney and advance directives in a bit. So with that, our clients pay no fees. Imagine that. That's nice. We don't handle family law. We don't handle criminal law. We don't handle estate planning. But by all means, we encourage you to have potential clients call our helpline, because if we can't help, we can certainly put that person in the direction of someone who can. So, any questions on that so far?
Very good. Next slide.
Yeah.
Now onto the maps. So here is just a good example of the difference in our state, and we all know how our state is aging. This is 1980 and 2014. Just shows you the drastic change in the median age, and we are getting older of a state, and as somebody who was born in the 80s and still has always lived in the state, this is kind of where we are and where we're going. And then the next slide is where we are a little bit closer to where we are now. And as you can see, basically the whole state is around, the median age of 50. So we're all basically, what I think this means for us is that we're all going to need these tools that we're about to talk about. So this is the learning section. And if you find yourself in a position where you're going to need someone else to speak for you, you are going to want to know the differences between these next few legal terms. And so pay attention. There are private tools, and Simon's up again. So
Thank you, Angela. Okay, so as Angela mentioned briefly, surrogate decision making. Another way to describe that is the implementation or effectuation of substituted judgment. We're talking about when someone is appointed to act on another's behalf at that other person's request. So private tools is what I'm going to discuss. What we're talking about when we're talking about private tools is certain legal documents that do not necessitate a court, a judge, a jury. These are things that private individuals can do on their own, with or without an attorney, although probably better with an attorney, especially if you qualify for our services, because you get our advice and our power of attorney for free. So when I say power of attorney, more specifically, I mean financial power of attorney. We're talking about money and other property belonging to an individual. The power of attorney itself, it's a legally binding contract between two parties, the principal and the agent. The principal is the person that signs the POA. The principal is the person that has the POA, and the principal is the person that appoints the agent to act in their best interest or on their behalf if there's a situation arises when that person needs to act on their behalf. A couple of things to consider, or to actually just to make sure you know, if there's nothing else you walk away with from our presentation, a power of attorney is not a person. It's a contract. It's a piece of paper. And someone does not have, quote, power of attorney over, unquote, another person. In fact, in the dynamic between principal and agent, whatever the principal says is what the agent has to do. It's as simple as that. Even if it's a bad decision in the eyes of an agent. However, there's one circumstance in which the agent's decisions will trump the principal's decisions, and that's when the principal has been deemed incapacitated by a medical doctor or a judge. But short of incapacitation, whatever the principal wants to do with their money or property is what the agent has to go along with, assuming the agent is willing to serve as an agent. Let's see. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of the durable power of attorney. It's become redundant since 2010. In Maine, at least, all powers of attorney are considered durable. What does durable mean? That means that the power of attorney, the contract, the legally binding agreement, survives the incapacitation of the principal. It's kind of the whole point of the thing. If the principal becomes incapacitated, comatose or whatnot, the agent can step into the principal's shoes and act in their best interest. Once the principal passes away, the power of attorney, the POA, disappears. It's not a will. So if the principal is not alive, there is no POA. The principal can revoke the power of attorney at any time for whatever reason, so long as they have capacity. And I should have mentioned this on the front end. The power of attorney can't be created unless the principal has capacity at the time it's signed. Let's see. The agent has a legally binding obligation to honor, like I said, the wishes of the principal.
And a fiduciary duty.
And a fiduciary duty. Fiduciary, that's a fancy word for money, I think. And in some cases, potentially in all, in which the agent did not live up to their duties pursuant to the specific language of the power of attorney, that person could be prosecuted. So we're talking about criminal law, or sued in civil court. So it's a serious thing, which is why it's so important for the principal to carefully select an agent. So I wrote a list down of just things that the ideal agent should possess. The agent should be available, which this day and age could mean, electronically. So they could live in San Diego if you live in Portland, Maine, if the principal lives in Portland, Maine. But ideally, you want them physically local too, if that's an option. They need to be committed. They need to be diplomatic because they're going to be facing potential scenarios where there are adverse parties or things are not going well. That's why people call lawyers, is when things aren't going well. I would suggest that the agent needs to be emotionally strong, a good listener, organized, and trustworthy is probably the biggest thing is trustworthy. And I would say, like, the ideal agent would keep the principal up to speed on all matters relevant to the POA, the money and the property, educate the principal when appropriate on certain scenarios that the principal is facing, and not be afraid to disagree with the agent. Sorry to disagree with the principal. Yes, what the principal says has to be abided by, so long as the principal has capacity. But that doesn't mean that an agent can't chime in with their own opinion. So, any questions?
I see a question in the chat from Donna. I'll read it to you. It's the power of attorney is listing money and property, but healthcare POA, that would be covering medical healthcare decisions if individual is unable to do so. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the power of attorney is for money, and then the healthcare power of attorney, what we're going to refer to, which is slightly different, is as an advanced directive, is all about healthcare. And great timing with that question, because oh wait, sorry, what's the next slide?
Let's see.
Okay,
So
well, we will tackle advanced directives soon.
but the reason why you'd want to use the private tools is because you don't want to have to use the public tools, which is the next slide here. This would involve you having to go to court. Well, not you probably, because your loved one would probably have to do this for you because you would be incapacitated, and or maybe the state would have to do this for you. And this is when this is guardianship and conservatorship, and in Maine, we did change this in a few years ago so that now the probate code isn't as strict and you don't lose all your rights like you used to. And it does call for supported decision making, which does allow the individual to have some rights still, but if you can ahead of time use private tools to select an agent and you do have a trusted individual that you can appoint as your agent in a financial power of attorney or advanced directive, that is definitely going to be the way to go. Conservatorship or guardianship is just a lot harder to undo, a lot just more difficult, and the way that is done is oftentimes through a PP 505, which is through the medical profession. Like a doctor would do this in an emergency room or some other type of medical setting, saying that you don't have capacity or you're incapacitated or you don't have, and once that's done, then a visitor, there's a whole series of events that occur. And once that's started, there are chances to sort of undo it, but it's more final. And if you, and sometimes that's the way it has to be. There are situations where, people get in a serious car accident, or, but generally, if you're thinking ahead about the future, you're getting older and you are going to need someone's help at some point, we all should probably have somebody that we can turn to at times who can make choices for us. And those tools are the private tools that we are going to discuss more. But the public tools are available, and those are these tools. And if you are in the medical profession, you probably have heard about PP 505, and maybe some of you have come across them. And if you have questions, please do ask. But at Legal Services for Maine Elders, we generally work more with the private tools. And then what's this my slide to talk about?
Oh, this is a final last resort option among the public tools when someone doesn't have an advanced directive or guardianship or anything else in place. There's this legal term of and concept of medical surrogacy.
Oh yeah, this is where doctors will turn to.
Well, yeah, there's a hierarchy of I'm sure you can imagine it, of who the doctor will turn to make medical decisions for the incapacitated person. And this is solely with folks that have lost capacity. And that hierarchy it's the spouse, and then the adult children, and then the brothers and sisters, etc.
And this could be actually highly problematic because say we have a client was being exploited and they don't have any private tools in place, and the doctor turns to the exploiter, and the exploiter's now the one making these decisions. That probably does happen quite a bit, as you could imagine, because without these private tools in place. So that's kind of, I think, probably why we're talking about this, because you know you should be thinking about who would the doctors be turning to. Sometimes it's maybe not you. Maybe you don't want your spouse, or your child, or your closest person that normally people would assume would be the person to make those choices. So
yeah, you don't want to be in a position where you're facing this concept of medical surrogacy. If you've got the time, and you need to get a power of attorney and an advance directive, and the more folks that know about your POA and your advance directive, the more that they know about it, the better, because it means it increases the chances of your wishes being honored. So when I meet with a client and we talk about powers of attorney, and then we go ahead and execute one, I make a note of where they bank, and then I will email copies of the power of attorney that we just executed to all their financial institutions. And when they do advance directives, likewise, they should give as many copies as possible to their primary care provider, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, medical doctor, whatever. Yeah.
I do believe we only have one more slide, and then I'll stop sharing, and then I will also, I think we should talk a little bit more about powers of attorney and what we have seen, and why we want to do more of them.
You have advanced directives and an APS.
Oh, an APS. Yeah, where did my slide go? Did I skip it? Oh, here it is. Okay, no, I didn't.
Where's the advanced directives?
All right. So now we're going to talk about adult protective services. We work with them often, and from our perspective, we can connect to them right now with for resources. They have elder service connections, which I love that program, and so APS will assess the individual to see if they meet their definition for incapacitated adult or dependent adult. And if they're a dependent adult, that means that they have, they're an adult who is dependent for a physical or mental condition that substantially impairs their ability to provide for themselves. And, it can be tricky, but I know they get lots of training on this. And when I first started at LSE, like 10 years ago, I was more concerned about making APS referrals, but nowadays I feel like we collaborate really well, and I'm sure there's some APS people on here, so I appreciate all the hard work that they do. And especially I think maybe with the probate code being reworked, I generally just don't think that we're all just trying to help people, and there's a lot of older people out there suffering. I know APS makes referrals to us if they think that the older adult can make choices for themselves. And we get a lot of training on capacity and how to make sure that we're working with our clients to, I know talked about earlier, what time of day is best for the client. I might have to meet with my client. I have a client right now who's 80, who I've met with probably a dozen times. I know he knows who I am, but I don't think he could remember my name, but I know he knows I'm a lawyer. I know he knows where I work, or legal aid. I know he knows I'm helping him with exploitation. And these are the types of things that are important. And so, I know that APS referred him to us. And so, but this is exactly the type of collaboration that we do with APS. But APS is the type of organization that would do the public tools. So they're very familiar with that public tool slide that I was talking about. They're the ones who would be, facilitating, public guardianship or public conservatorship. Hopefully finding a family member if they could, that would be able to help out with that. And then on this slide here, incapacitated adult definitions. in case you have any questions about that, I just want to check the chat real quick. Oh, whoops.
I got a couple more things.
Okay, okay. and-
Yeah, speaking of agencies we work well with, in addition to Adult Protective Services, shout out to the Maine Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. We work with them regularly. They're a huge help to us. So if there are any of you in the audience, thanks. And I apologize to Donna. It seems I skipped we skipped right over advanced directives right after I told you we were going to talk about them. Let's talk about them. First off, let's suss out the difference between an advanced directive and a healthcare power of attorney. They're almost the same thing. However, by definition, the healthcare power of attorney requires an agent. Okay, an agent like I talked about for the financial power of attorney, somebody who steps into the shoes of the principal and can act on their behalf at their request, or if they become incapacitated. An advanced directive, however, does not necessitate the appointment of an agent, but you can have multiple agents for a healthcare power of attorney or an advanced directive. We use the Maine Hospital Association's advanced directive form. I tell you that it's 17 pages, but that sounds daunting. It's not. Half that's just instructions. And one not need complete the whole thing for it to be valid. And as Donna asked about, just to make this clear, advanced directives and healthcare powers of attorney, but that's all about making healthcare decisions in advance. And it's often with incapacitation in mind. We're talking about it's a personal decision. Do you want life support, tube feeding, other things? Do you have anything to?
Well, we got some more questions here.
Oh.
It says, what can be done if a person who no longer has capacity due to advancing dementia grants financial power of attorney or changes their agent at the urging of family members or other interested parties? Well, my question would be, how did they change it? When did they change it? I have a lot of questions, I guess. I think that's a very, I have questions. Lots of,
Well, first of all, if in this hypothetical, Linda, the principal has lost capacity, then nothing can be changed.
Right.
And hopefully there are stops along the way to prevent it from being changed. If I meet with a client who has lost capacity, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, we decline cases. I haven't declined many, but I have declined.
Well, we would have to decline in that
If they don't have capacity.
if they don't have capacity.
Yeah.
I would also hope, although I don't know what notaries, I don't know their responsibilities in full, but I think I would hope that they have to have some training in capacity or competence, because as an attorney who can notarize things, I would never notarize something if I thought the person lacked capacity. Do you want to go back to the question? So what can be done? Let's say the person lacks capacity and the worst scenario unfolds. The POA gets adjusted or rescinded, and a new one gets executed in which a bad acting agent is out there. That we have legal tools to try to fix that problem.
Yeah, but that's kind of like an exploitation case that we would do. So
Yeah.
we do financial exploitation cases. So that would be a great referral to our organization in the sense of hopefully we would meet with somebody, APS, I guess, Adult Protective Services, if the person still doesn't have capacity. Sometimes people regain capacity if they had, if they lost it because of a UTI,
Now that I'm thinking more about this tricky hypo from Linda, if this person lacked capacity, we would have to tread lightly on establishing the attorney-client relationship. Having said that, we don't need much. I think there's all sorts of different types of capacity and competence, which we are not getting into today. But probably the bare minimum is what's required to establish an attorney-client relationship. So it's a case-by-case basis.
Which we get lots of training on, and we, sometimes we disagree with doctors on, and I present to doctors a lot, or not a lot, but occasionally because
You can get a hold of them.
Well, And I think because sometimes they don't realize that there are private tools, like powers of attorney, that sometimes are less invasive than the public tools that maybe they're only accustomed to, because they want to just help families sometimes, and they think that doing the PP 505 is the only way that it can help somebody. And so, sometimes explaining that to a group of doctors is helpful. But anyway, did we have any?
For those not who don't have chat or aren't looking at it, we've got a couple of folks who've chimed in about notaries and capacity training, and it appears that that's not part of the training to become a notary, which that's unfortunate. Chrissy has seen banks willing to add interested parties to the account of clearly incapacitated adults. That's no good. Yeah, banks can be tricky. For the most part, we work well with them, but sometimes I'll have one that I've sent that email to. Hey, I represent so and so who just executed a power of attorney. Here's your copy, and they'll say, "Well, we won't accept it. We need the original." Well, I mean that there's no legal. There's nothing legal out there that allows them to do that. It's just their own policy. So it's a bit of a back and forth thing. I had a bank. I was a credit union in Mexico. And they told me, I did not make friends with them that day. They told me at the bank that whenever someone is supposed to, whenever an agent acting under power of attorney is coming into the bank to deposit money, withdraw money, do any banking, that agent needs to show up with the original power of attorney, which makes things, as you can imagine, logistically a nightmare for the principal and for the agent. Yeah.
Well, we hope you learned something, and feel free to ask us questions later, even. I think you can email us. We can put our emails in the chat and or call our organization, because you can get free legal advice. Or if you're 60 and above. And
if you're calling on behalf of someone, that person really needs to be on the phone, unless you're going to mail or fax us or email us a copy of the power of attorney and you're actually the agent.
Also check out our website, because it's really good.
Yeah. And while we have brick and mortar offices, all of our cases start through the helpline. So just start there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela and Simon. All right. If you have questions for them, we can get a hold of them after this meeting, but we do need to go into the next session with Candace Simeone, Maine's first Elder Justice Investigator. Candace, go ahead.
All right, how's my audio?
Sounding good to me.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to actually pop up my PowerPoint first before I get yakking, so I know it's going to work. Let's see. Maybe it's not going to work. Can you see it?
I can't see it. Jake, does Candace have the ability to share her screen?
She should, yes. Candace, can you speak again so you're highlighted?
Yeah, let's give this a whirl. I think I got it this time. You see it?
Yes,
Yeah, we can
that.
see your screen now. If you want to go into slideshow, it'll probably be better. There you go.
Is it working?
Good to go.
All right, I have a question too. Can you see icons like our faces as well? Or is it just the PowerPoint presentation?
I can see you up there, Candace.
Okay, all right. I can't
Yeah.
see you guys. I can't even see the chat. So feel free to interrupt me at any point, because again, I cannot see. I only can see my one slide. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Candace Simeone. I'm a police officer. I have been one for 22 years here in the state of Maine. My passion for the work that I currently do started long before I wore a uniform, though. It started with my Nana, and she was my best friend. She was the heart of our family, and I admired her deeply. Like so many other adults that we serve, she represented wisdom, resilience. They're really why we're here today. And she's a big part why my work matters to me. While I was in the interview process to become a police officer, I didn't realize it, but my Pepe was being taken advantage of. I didn't have any training yet. I didn't have a badge yet, but I had the instinct that something wasn't right. and I had nowhere to turn. Law enforcement didn't even know what elder abuse was. And looking back, I feel like that experience really shaped everything in my career and who I am as a person. That perspective gave me something that I can't teach and I've never learned. I just have it. And it made my work very personal. So over the years, I've seen crimes that take a lot of money from our older population, but they also take trust and independence, hope, identity. And I'm seeing more recently our suicide rate amongst our older population has been drastically increased. So these victims suffer in silence and often until the end of their lives, unfortunately. So I realized when we talk about, like Donna was saying this morning, and statistics are important, it's very hard to retrieve statistics within our law enforcement departments on elder justice data. So I'm very passionate about supporting our law enforcement professionals that are doing this work every day and oftentimes not even realizing that they're seeing elder abuse. The cases are super complex, they're emotional, and at times they are very time consuming. So I focus on helping officers across our state to build knowledge and confidence and connection so they don't feel like they're carrying these cases alone, which I felt like very much so in the first 3 or 4 years of my career, until I emphasized what the multidisciplinary approach was and created my own team that I'll talk to you guys about very soon. Excuse me. I think it's important to bring the right people to the table when we're talking about our older population and victims. I often remind my fellow officers, some of them are in the audience today, that even though prosecution is important, it's certainly not the primary goal when it comes to working on elder justice cases. The priority has to be the safety of our victims, because prosecution rates are unfortunately very low when it comes to this niche of crime, and that cannot be a gauge for your success. So as you probably can see, and those of you who know me know, I'm super passionate about this work. Because I know what it feels like to be on both sides, both as a professional, but also as a family member. And I believe that we can do a lot better, not just responding to harm after it's done, but we really need to stop the victimization before it starts. And so that's why I'm here today. I truly believe that if something doesn't exist, if you're meeting, if you're having conversations about things that are wrong with our system or our world, I think that you need to really change it. And so that's what I've done through the very beginning of my career. I knew there was no resources and tools and groups to meet with. So I created them. And same thing with my current position. I kept on, everyone would talk about what was wrong with law enforcement and why we weren't prosecuting cases. And so for me, I said, well, then rather than me continuing to talk about what's wrong, let's figure out if there's a way that we can make this right. And so as a result, I was able to establish my new position, which is pretty cool. So today I'm going to talk to you about, kind of walk you through the work that I did to create this position for our state, what the position really entails. It's basically focusing on mentoring officers, providing education and training, and collecting data to help shape sustainable initiatives going forward. And I truly hope that I can create something, or at least recommend something that will stick to help law enforcement agencies across our state to feel equipped and supported and confident when dealing with these cases before I retire, which is only in a few years here now. So as you can see, I obviously graduated in 2005. I started my career a year prior, so I'm in my 22nd year in law enforcement right now. I have a couple slides on resources on how to connect with me. I think I could probably talk for about 2 days about my work and elder justice and my passion. So today is going to be kind of a very quick snapshot as to who I am, my work, and then what I currently can offer. And I think the most important thing is resources from any of these conferences that we get together. Make sure you're getting everybody's names and numbers and connecting with them. Next month, I'm actually starting a law enforcement only focus group focusing just on elder justice initiatives and cases so that we can talk openly about cases. And a lot of those members who are going to be on that team are people that I've met throughout conferences like this. So I think that's the most important part about these conferences is networking. So the task force I told you about, for those of you who don't know what that is, in 2005, when I was a young police officer, I was working the beat down in Kennebunkport, and I immediately noticed that the area was inundated with an older population. A lot of people were living alone, and I was responding to call after call to well-being checks and lonely older adults who were sitting in beautiful estates and had money and possessions, and they were falling victim to scams. Back then, we called them gypsy paver companies, where they would come around and take advantage of our older populations by knocking on their doors. And then we started to see a lot of family members who, like we just got a presentation, who were trying to become power of attorneys or guardians, or kind of weaseling their ways into their older relatives' lives, so ultimately they could financially exploit them. And that was the stuff I started to see, and resources I really was not aware of until I started attending summits and conferences and connecting and networking, and creating this amazing team, which is, like I said, called the York County Elder Abuse Task Force. We are now 501c3. We've been doing this now for a very long time, over 20 years. Some of the originating members who were in that photo actually are still with me today. Just a bunch of hearts, wonderful people who rolled up their sleeves and really trying to make a difference in our state before we all retire, and pass the torch, if you will. Our number one goal is education. We realize that we need to stop this stuff before it starts, because oftentimes when we get cases, especially me, the damage is done. The chances for me to recover money is very hard, but I will never be able to give relationships back, or trust, or dignity. So for us, we all vow to really kind of take opportunities to go out into the community and educate and meet people. For me, it's been great because a lot of people have misconceptions about law enforcement, and I understand that, and some of it is our fault, but we are approachable and we do want to help, and there are officers like me who just truly have a passion for protecting our older population, which is the hardest population to just come to a police department and tell their story to. So these members, both former and past members, are just some of the most remarkable people. Some of them are on this call today. I see Bridget on the screen below, on the bottom. It's just, I think stopping it before it starts is great. I kind of get offended when I get cases because I'm like, I wish I could have planted the seed before I spoke to this woman. The extent of these crimes when I started was maybe $1,000, $2,000. Now I've got one right now, $200,000, $500,000. And it's not just scams. It's not the Nigerian scams that everyone thinks is deleting our older adults' bank accounts. It's family members. It's people that they know. Heck, it's pastors. It's people of authority. So don't be fooled to think that the scams are ultimately what's taking advantage of our older population. Unfortunately, it's their own family members and people that they love and trust. So again, we're 501c3. So everything in my life has been based on grants. As a police officer, I can't directly solicit for funds anyway. So all of the things that I talk about are made possible by mini grants, by just wonderful people in the community who are helping make this stuff happen. What you see on the screen right now are grants that I wrote as a result of cases I've worked. For example, top left, the personal amplifiers. I was working a case with the York County Sheriff's Office a few years back, and the case originated with me at my agency. There was a woman who attended one of my educational conferences, and she made an appointment to see me. And we sat and spoke for a while. Very lucid, wonderful woman whose nephew was taking advantage of her. The crime was occurring in York County Sheriff's jurisdiction, so I passed the case over to the county sheriff's office, and I said, you're going to have to go do an interview with my friend. I told her the information, and he interviewed her, and he called me and said, Candace, I am so sorry. He says, but she's got some significant cognitive impairment. Every time I would ask her a question, she'd answer something that was not even related to what I was talking about. And so I was like, well, I have no idea. This doesn't make any sense. So I went and did an interview with him and her in the room. He would ask a question, and sure enough, he would ask, what's your favorite pie? And she started talking about the things that were in the sky. And I would ask the same question, and she would answer it right away. And so what we ended up finding out was that she didn't have cognitive impairment. She, in fact, had hearing impairment. And so that sat with me for a while thinking, how many cases have I missed? And how many cases has law enforcement missed, writing people off as having cognitive impairment when in fact maybe it's just it's a hearing impairment. So we wrote a grant, and now every law enforcement agency in York County that has an interview room has a personal amplifier. So things like that. Again, we find issues, and once we talk about them, we try to find solutions, and that in fact holds true with the hidden cameras on the bottom, etc. So that was just my point, that if we're going to talk the talk, let's walk the walk, and together we can make a pretty good dent in this, what we call epidemic. So I've also learned along the years that you will, if you host an elder abuse conference or a presentation or a scam awareness presentation, time in and time out, you're going to get the same people over and over again. And generally it's the pickleball players, it's the people who want to come and support you because they've learned who you are and want to support your work. And we realized quickly that we weren't reaching the people that we needed to reach. So we had to be super creative, and I mean super creative. So you don't necessarily see a cop in a biker bar, but you saw me in a biker bar in 2019 when we were granting a wish. So we grant wishes for people over the age of 60 who may have a bucket list item or a wish on their list that they haven't been able to fulfill because they're too busy taking care of everybody else. For me, I felt like that was a good opportunity. So our task force does this, and yeah, it is for our older population. I always tell my task force members, I can't pay you in money, but I'm going to pay you in warm fuzzies. And so this is one way that I pay them in warm fuzzies, but it's also a way for us to get in front of an audience who necessarily wouldn't go to a scam awareness panel or an elder abuse conference. And so because of these crazy outside of the box ideas, we've been able to reach populations and niches that we would never have been able to reach otherwise. And now we've got these beautiful stories and connections that we're able to talk about. And I'm able to give these warm fuzzies to my task force members who talk about it at their family gatherings. And it's something that I'm so proud of to this day. Currently, I had to tell you guys this just because I had to. So in 2020, when the pandemic hit, the real pandemic hit, law enforcement, pretty much healthcare, first responders, we all had to work while everyone else was stuck behind their doors. And so I realized quickly that Meals on Wheels programs, volunteers had dropped drastically. And because I had to work, I wanted to help. And so I had asked my chief if I could take a few routes on, and I did. And it was an amazing experience. It gave me a chance to connect with our older population that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. But I also adopted more grandparents, which I did since the very beginning of my law enforcement career. But I fell in love with some pretty remarkable people who have incredible stories. And the person you see on the screen is one of my best friends. And she was someone I met. She reminded me of my Nana. And she saw me grant a few wishes along the years, and I'd always ask her what her wish was. And it took a while, but one day she told me that she wished that there was a beauty pageant for older women over the age of 60, so that they had a stage to walk in, and they had people clap for them because they've clapped for so many people for all of their lives, and they currently did, but they really had no reason for their family and friends to clap for them. So she said that she wanted to have a beauty pageant. And so it became more of a joke than anything. And I said to her, well, one day I'm going to do a beauty pageant for you. And she would always say, I'm going to be your first contestant. And so it was a mission of mine, but I am no beauty pageant person. I had no idea what I was doing. And I have been able, knock on wood, to grant every wish except for Mrs. Fricks because she passed away. And it really sat with me, and it bothered me. And I did a presentation, and there was a woman in the room who actually was Miss Teen Maine's mom, and said, we're going to make this happen. So the wish that we're granting this year is the 2026 Golden Beauty Pageant. We are full of contestants already. We have 20 of them. It's going to be held at the Sanford Performing Arts venue right off of the Sanford High School, which is a beautiful venue. But to see this community come together, banks and different organizations, community members, it's been remarkable. We're going to be able to provide luncheons. They're having a real pageant. Like, this is the real deal, and I'm very proud to be part of it. But think about this. There's 800 seats in that venue, and I plan to fill every single one of those seats. And yeah, it's a beauty pageant, and yeah, it's about these wonderful women, but it's going to give me the opportunity to speak to 800 people who probably wouldn't attend our scam or our elder abuse conferences. it'll give me that chance to talk about it. Now and again, throughout the entire pageant, I will be talking about the task force and things that we do and elder abuse. And if any of you are interested and you want to come and share the stage for a few minutes or have booths outside, please get a hold of me, because that's what it's about. We'll be reaching people who otherwise wouldn't attend any of our sessions. You can find information about the task force if you want education, you want us to come do a talk. I do a lot of talks to professionals as well. I have a social worker club meeting next week that I'm going to do with their ethics training. I've spoken to attorneys, civil, criminal attorneys. We'll be more than happy to come and have those conversations and do those trainings if you're interested. And you can contact us at these contacts on the website. We also have a resource page that we try to put up PDFs. You can see it on the screen now. And we try to keep everyone updated as to some of the quirky things that we do, but also some of the real things that we do. So go ahead and jot that down. You can get a hold of us, learn about us, and be part of us if you are so inclined. So with that, I am talking fast, and I do know that. So you'll have the slide deck. You can contact me anytime. I will be going through the last few slides pretty quickly since I've got 9 minutes left. Why am I here today? For the most part, it's to introduce myself, who I am, but what got me to this current position. So back in 2019, I went down to Washington, D.C. I testified in front of Congress about my work, and they wanted me to make recommendations going forward about how we can be better, specifically in law enforcement. And my whole message is how can we be better if we know if we're not even sure what we're doing, or we're not even sure what we're doing wrong yet, because we haven't had a focus on elder justice and law enforcement since my duration back in 2004. And so along the way, I have met a good handful of amazing law enforcement professionals like Chief Booth, who really embrace this niche and want to empower our other officers to feel what we feel and to leave kind of a legacy in a sense, so that when we're gone, we feel comfortable knowing that they're going to be picking up the pieces long after we retire. And so in order to do that, we needed to start programs, training, certification programs. We needed to develop maybe a team of investigators like the Maine Drug Enforcement Agency, with skilled investigators to really saturate our state with knowledge and investigations. And so my proposal was just that, hoping to start a team in the state of Maine. I broke the state of Maine into 3 different regions. So 1, 2, 3, lower, mid, and upper. And my idea was to have a go-to person in each one of those jurisdictions to work with departments and investigate these cases, take them seriously, network, learn resources, and be that point person from now until forever, because I believe this is something that we need to do in the state of Maine, especially being the oldest state in the nation. Those maps that were produced in the first presentation were phenomenal, and it shows how much we need to really embrace that. And we need to protect our older population, and all of us are aging. So we're going to protect ourselves as well. Unfortunately, because of funding, it's very hard in law enforcement to find this funding. The JAG grant was the one that took us on. And unfortunately, instead of having 3 investigators in 3 different regions, it landed with just me single-handedly trying to do what I can for 2 years. So I was hoping for a longer grant, but we got a 2-year pilot, which is pretty exciting. And so my goal is to obviously do my pilot, but it's really to focus on what we can do to sustain this initiative, to sustain this passion. Because in 2 years, when this ends, it would be heartbreaking if it didn't continue. The traction that I've been able to get, and the buy-in, and people are excited right now. And I'm hoping that I'm doing that along the way, but we should see. We will see, I should say. So why do I focus on elder justice specialties within law enforcement? So we're an aging population. We've gone through that several times today, but it's the reality of it. It's the truth. We are an aging state, and we are really not equipped to protect our older population still in this day. The complexity of cases is astounding, from financial aspects to cognitive aspects. You've got to understand what encompasses family dynamics. You need to have contacts at Legal Services for Maine Elders. You need to understand how APS functions. I feel like there's a lot of people who are kind of sitting in that gray area right now, where they're not sure if they should contact APS, and they're not confident enough to go to the law enforcement agency. So they kind of sit with their sadness. And those are the people that I really, really want to reach. Almost like we need a triage center where people can call in and just ask they call it stupid questions. And I said time and time again, they're not stupid questions. You've got to call. So I feel like I've learned in the last half of a year that there is that gray gap that we need to figure out how to reach in some kind of a triage way. But the cases are very complex, and that triage center needs to know who they're supposed to refer these cases to. The underreporting is so incredibly significant. So I have reached out to several agencies already. They've been awesome. They filled out data sheets that I've asked them, and I would say about at least 95% of all agencies that have responded so far do not collect data on elder justice cases, which is crazy to me, because like we said, this is happening all the time. The statistics are going to be daunting, but we need to figure out how to create widgets within their system so that we can capture that data more appropriately. System navigation goes with that networking, of course. Getting to know the people around you so that when you have a case and you're in the heat of the moment, you know who to contact, because a lot of our officers have no idea. And I'm learning that as well. They don't know who to contact. They don't even know who their APS supervisor is in the area. They don't even talk to other law enforcement agencies. We're kind of a type A population, if you will, and people rely on us so much to solve all their problems that sometimes that's a disadvantage for us, because we're trying to single-handedly take on these complex cases, and ultimately they don't go as well as we hope. So my goal is to really create elder justice investigators and specialized units in our state so that they can act as a bridge and a point of contact for each one of those regions at least. And we are someone who understands all of these systems, and we can coordinate them effectively, and we know how to work and interview older adults. So again, we realized, and as I'm talking more and more with law enforcement agencies, we are held at a very high standard, and sometimes we lose sight that these cases are about the victim and not us, and not about. It doesn't always have to be black and white, and so those trauma-informed approaches is really important. But a lot of your municipal officers don't have time to sit with complex cases and work them the way they should. All right, so I only have a few more minutes, so let me just quickly go through this. So first of kind, So we are lucky and blessed to have this position. I am trying to be a sponge, trying to represent all of law enforcement so that I can make a really nice report and hopefully make these recommendations stick, and we can continue some sustainability as it relates to elder justice and law enforcement going forward. But this pilot does conclude at the end of 2027. We are realizing that the number one risk factor of all of these cases, whether it's financial abuse, whether it's physical abuse from a family, caretaker abuse, it's isolation and loneliness. And so I just want to say, I know law enforcement, we're always the first ones to be blamed when things don't go well when it comes to elder abuse cases, and I get it, and a lot of it is our issue, and we're trying to figure this out. But we're also really trying, and all of the administration, all of the chiefs that have responded to me so far they all said that they would actually assign one of their officers as part of this team that I just told you guys about. And at first, when we were talking about I was talking to the committee that was funding this. They said, I don't know if you're going to have a lot of buy-in. I would say right now we're at 100% buy-in for law enforcement agencies to support this idea and to really focus on elder justice in our state. For example, the town of Ogunquit, the chief and the town manager, because of this pilot, because they've known me for so long, I've worked with them on cases, etc. They had to vacate their small little cottage, which you see on the screen, and they went to this gorgeous municipal building. And as a result of the pilot and their desire to make sure that this stuff sticks, they actually gifted me this building. So when I talked to you guys about the Beacon Cottage, This is what the Beacon Cottage is. It's at 102 Main Street in Ogunquit. The town has fully absorbed all costs. My office, I'm actually sitting inside that little unit right now at the back of it. And I've also started several different initiatives throughout the Beacon Cottage as my thank you and a way for me to connect with older adults as well. And we are having way more people walk into this non-intimidating cottage than I ever had at the law enforcement agencies I worked in. So when I talk about the triage center, I feel like that's what we're doing. People just come in, they're like, I don't want to give you my date of birth. I just want to talk to you about what's happening in my life so I know where to go from here. And that's been pretty remarkable, keeping the data and those statistics. But that triage center I talk about wasn't something I had planned on thinking about until I got into this role. And I think that that's something that we need to think about in the state of Maine as well. We're still doing a lot of education. We're hosting outreach and training here. At the hub, I do have a couple rooms, one of which is a recorded interview room where there's a fingerprinting station. Agencies can book their prisoners if they need to, or they can have a recorded interview session for evidence. APS can stop by, any other organization. It's been a really awesome hub, if you will, and that's what this grant is a hub and spoke model. I know I'm talking fast, I'm sorry. Also, we offer a book nook, which is, I'm kind of running it in parallel with the Department of Justice's book club. So we have large print books that entertain our older population. We have a safe technology hub where we're working with local colleges to have interns here, IT interns here to help older adults, anyone over the age of 60 can partake in any of our initiatives here. They come in, they bring their phone and say, I have a really interesting link. Can I click it? And then the intern will tell them no. And we've had someone come in and do telehealth appointments. They don't have technology at home. So he came in to do a doctor's appointment that he wouldn't otherwise be able to attend. We have a huge resource center here. We have discussion and workshop space where we've hosted several other professionals. Some of you are in the room. We host all of this stuff, by the way, is completely donations. It's all people who are doing their time to make this happen. For example, Chris Clough, he owns Foundations Counseling down in York. He does a widow support group here, again, for free. Everyone who attends for free. We have a VA specialist, etc. Clubs. That's me. We already talked about that. So again, contact me. Here's my information. If you have any questions, if you want to be part of anything, if you have anything to add to my report, please do so. I'm always available. I'm usually running around all over the place, and so maybe you'll see me, maybe not. But please stop into the Beacon Cottage and visit us. Did I do this correctly, or am I still sharing?
No, you're
No,
not
I
sharing.
can see you.
I can't see you guys, but anyway, so there's that. I think I did a half an hour, which, Chief, that's pretty good for me. You got to give me credit because usually I can run on like another hour.
No, you did good, Candace, and I always like hearing from you, and I'm excited to see Maine law enforcement kind of move forward with more elder justice initiative stuff.
You're a
Thank
big
you,
leader in
Candace.
that, so thank you for your support.
All right, we're going to move right into our next presentation, AARP Fraud Watch Network with Jen Klaus. Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, everyone. I have a slideshow I can start sharing as well. My name is Jen Klaus, and I am with AARP Fraud Watch Network. And it's totally okay if you had no idea that we do anything with fraud or with victim services. Mostly we're known for our work supporting and working to advocate for older adults, but we do have fraud intervention and support services for victims. So let me share my screen real fast. Okay. Oops. Maybe not. Let's see. Maybe not the question page, if that's what you see. Let me. Oh, goodness. Okay. Let me try this again. Okay. So sorry. Okay. Okay, I think I have it going now. So like I said, we do fraud prevention and fraud support, and fraud is definitely a crime that does not have a specific population that's targeted necessarily because everybody can be a victim of fraud. But what we do know is that older adults report greater money amounts of money stolen. And we also know that financial recovery is a lot harder for older adults because of the life stage that they're at. So what we have for victim services is we have a Fraud Watch Network helpline, and we also have support groups. So that's what I'm going to talk about real fast today. So the first thing to know about our helpline, and I will have those numbers at the end as well, is that you do not need to be an AARP member to call our helpline. You do not even need to be an older adult to call our helpline. We get calls from people of all ages. We even get calls from juveniles. It's kind of surprising how many juveniles have credit cards these days, but also they have a high proportion of extortion for images that they send to other people. So we talk to them. You actually don't even need to be a victim. You can have a question, you can report a scam. You could also be a loved one, or we do get calls from social workers at times who are working with victims who need to know how to kind of help direct and support the older adult they're working with. Our helpline is free, so it does not cost any money. We do utilize the language line, so that means that we can talk to people in, I think it's like 240 different languages. So language should not be a barrier. We can also communicate to people who are hard of hearing through those services as well. Our helpline is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And what happens is that people who call our helpline go to a helpline agent and report what's going on, and the helpline agent will then refer them to one of our fraud support specialists if they've been a victim. If they're just reporting, then we just take the report at the agent level. But then once it goes to one of our fraud support specialists, then we can start working on resources and directing them on where to go and how to get some support. So we do take over 100,000 reports annually, which makes it about 300 to 500 calls every day that we get. We have 140 volunteers across the country, and they are mostly retired fraud investigators, retired law enforcement, retired lawyers. We have a postal inspector who volunteers. There are people who have done this work in the past and they want to keep doing this work even after they retire to continue to help and support victims. All of the calls that we get are reported to the FTC. So the FTC is getting all of the information that we have, including scam phone numbers, scam email addresses, and things like that. And that's also just one less place that victims need to report to. If you've ever worked with a victim of fraud, you know that there are so many places that victims have to report to local law enforcement, to the FBI, to potentially to Secret Service, to all kinds of places, which can be increasingly traumatic and time consuming for victims. So we do send all of those to the FTC. Our role on the helpline is to provide direction and support. So we provide resources and areas of where they can report so that they can also stop the scam and protect themselves from further loss of money. And I hate saying the word loss because this is a crime. So this is money stolen. It is not money that they lose somewhere in the couch or in the socks that you put in the dryer and you never get the other one back. You just get one single sock out of the dryer. That's not where this money goes. This goes to criminals. So I'm going to give you a few examples of calls that we have and kind of the direction and resources that we give to people. So the first is that a consumer received a pop-up message on her computer. She knew this was a scam, so she searched online for the Microsoft phone number. They remote access to her computer. She provided access to her computer as well as her social security number and access to her financial accounts. They have now cleaned out her life savings and taken over her accounts. This is a frequent call we get. Scammers do have fraudulent phone numbers on the internet, so anyone who Googles a phone number can connect with a scammer and not the real person. The action taken by our Fraud Watch specialist was to advise them to immediately turn off and unplug the computer, take their computer to a local repair store, report to the Microsoft imposter to IC3.gov, which is the FBI, and to FTC.gov. We do send the reports to the FTC, but sometimes people want to do it themselves, which they're entirely encouraged to do that. We encouraged her to contact her financial institutions to secure the accounts, change passwords once the computer was repaired, follow identity theft steps on identitytheft.gov, set up a credit freeze, check credit report, dispute inaccuracies, keep an eye out for anything else suspicious with your accounts. Call us back if you need additional help. Call 211 for community support and reach out to support groups. That's a lot. And that usually takes place over a conversation that's typically can last from 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on the type of scam. This is all done in a trauma-informed way. We do training every day with not every day, every month with our volunteers about trauma-informed language, about listening and providing support to victims, because this is very traumatic to people. It is a financial crime, but it involves a betrayal, and any kind of crime is going to increase the chances of trauma. So another example is a consumer was recently widowed. Shortly after she received a social media friend request, she accepted the request. She became friends with this person, and for months he didn't request anything from her. Then he said his granddaughter had fallen ill and he needed help with her medical bills. Consumers sent money via a peer-to-peer app to assist with medical bills. He kept asking for more and more money. When she asked him when he would come visit her, he asked for her to pay for his ticket, which she did, but he never showed up. That's when she knew it was a scam. The action that we took was to immediately discontinue communication with the scammer and do not send any more money. That was what we advised. Talked about red flags of scams and what scams typically look like. Advised her to contact the peer-to-peer app to alert about the scam, report to the FBI at the IC3. If she provided any personal information like social security number, follow up with ID theft prevention steps, and then offered the victim support group for additional support. Again, this is an example of a romance scam, and we get a lot of calls about romance scams. We also get a lot of calls from family members whose loved ones are in romance scams, and sometimes they can't acknowledge that they're in a scam. They're continuing to send money, and friends and family members are at a loss of what to do. So we can talk to them about the position that they're in and some tools in order to maybe help the victim see that they are in a scam. But it's a very intricate web that these criminals use to catch people and keep them what we call under the ether of believing that this is a real relationship and this is a real, they're really going to get the money back. So like I talked about, we do offer victim support groups. So we know that recovering from financial fraud, it involves two real paths. One is reporting, one is stopping the crime from continuing. It's talking about where you go from here, what resources you can use, and what needs to happen next. And the next path is really recovery and healing. Like I talked about, these are crimes that do involve a lot of trauma. And the other thing that they involve is an incredible amount of shame. Right now, I think probably the most the most crimes that involve victim blaming are going to be domestic violence, sexual assault, and fraud. And our victims feel that in their souls. You usually get a call on the helpline, and most of the time they will tell you how stupid they are, how they can't believe they fell for this, how they can't believe this happened. And so our role is also to make sure that they understand and know that this is a crime, that they are a victim of a crime, and that this is the fraudster criminal's job is to do this, and they're very, very good at their jobs. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with not with being more aware or anything other than this was a crime and a criminal who knows exactly what they're doing. So I'll tell you a little bit about our support groups. Our support groups are free as well. It's a free service to victims of fraud. Right now, we have 11 groups every week. Groups are about an hour. They can go over sometimes depending on how things are being shared and what's going on in the groups. The groups are facilitated by trained volunteers or staff. We also have a lot of our facilitators. We have 18 facilitators, and a lot of them are victims themselves. So it's a peer support group. We have groups that are specific to romance scams, and we also have groups that are specific to loved ones of fraud victims. And the reason we have those groups is romance scams have that added level of a relationship and a breakup that are involved, real kind of emotional connection that is now lost as well. So it's really important to have other support from other people who have been in that situation, that specific situation, to help support so that victims know they're not alone. So victims know that there are other people who have experienced this, and so victims can see from other participants in the group that there is a way to heal and recover from this kind of crime. It's really inspiring to see victims in their journey who come into our groups very vulnerable, very emotionally raw, and then they gradually get stronger and stronger and then start supporting other people in the group. It's really rewarding to see as a staff member. The reason we have groups specific to loved ones is because that is also a very unique position to be in. It is very difficult to watch someone you love, care about, even take care of, deplete their finances. And there is nothing that you can really do about it unless there are some cognitive issues that that can be addressed in a court by taking it to court to get some kind of power of attorney or some kind of way to legally stop that money from flowing out. But that's not always the case. It's just that these victims are just so under the spell and in that web. So it's really important to talk to loved ones about how to take care of themselves in this situation, about what they can do when the victim is ready to admit that it's a scam. And there's also a lot of anger that can come with victims, loved ones, because it's such a feeling of helplessness. And so we like to support victims of loved ones, loved ones of victims individually in groups like that. So I have about, let's see, 10 minutes left. So I want to put this up, our numbers, our helpline phone number, and that's our website as well. And the way to get to our support groups is there. That's my contact information in case you have any questions or need anything from me. But I wanted to kind of leave some room for questions that you guys might have about services that we provide to victims of fraud or prevention for fraud. If there are questions, I wanted to make sure we had room or time for that. or not.
There is a question in the chat.
Okay.
It's from Donna. Are you seeing new AI scams that involve using someone's voice or like
Yes,
voice?
definitely. We're seeing, so one of the major scams that we see is still Publishers Clearinghouse scams, or where you win a prize or a sweepstakes. And we're seeing actually AI like videos of someone famous saying, announcing this person's name. And so this victim gets this scam, gets this video, and it's someone famous. And so it looks legitimate, because why would George Clooney lie to you? Something like that. And it's all AI. We aren't getting a whole lot of calls where someone has called and it sounds exactly like their loved one, but that's also because that has always been a scam, where people call and say, hey, this is your nephew or your niece. And it's hard over the phone to kind of determine if that, phone voices are a little bit different than in-person voices. So that's always been kind of a scam, but we're definitely getting AI. Also, a lot of the AI scams that we're getting right now involve celebrities or people endorsing products that are like memory products or supplements, things like that, to help like make your life better. And since it's a celebrity that's endorsing it, it makes it look more legitimate. But it's not. It's a scam.
Thanks, Jen. Then another question is, do your support groups meet in person, by phone, virtually, or some kind of blend of those?
So our support groups, since they're open, they're national, we do them virtually. And we do require that people be able to be on camera so that everyone can see. And that's part of what confidentiality, for confidentiality and privacy purposes. But we can also work with people of how to set that up. So they're done all virtually. We don't have any in-person groups, just because realistically, everyone is kind of all over the place in the country.
Right. And then someone wants to know, is the helpline confidential?
So we share the reports with the FTC, but we do take out victim identifying information. It is confidential in that, we don't report to anyone. We don't tell anyone about that. I'm kind of trying to figure out what, we don't tell anyone. We do have people who call and report that, especially if maybe they have been caught up into some kind of money mule situation as a victim, or something where they could potentially be charged with a crime, which would be very vulnerable to someone telling that or talking about that. We don't disclose that to anyone. We don't report that to authorities. We do, if someone is talking about hurting themselves or mostly hurting themselves, we do contact 988, which is the crisis line, suicide line, or we ask them to do that. And we have made reports to APS, Adult Protective Services, before, because we do get calls from people concerned about non-stranger exploitation of older adults, or we get concerned about someone calling in and being incredibly angry at someone they're taking care of. And they're angry because now they can't go on the trip they wanted to, because this person they're taking care of just sent $10,000 to someone, and so they're not letting them go out. They've taken away the victim's phone and access to resources, which we want people to investigate that. So those are the only kind of exceptions, I would say.
Thank you. One person asks if you could go back one slide so that they will have a chance to write down the contact information.
Of course. And I think that well, let's see. How do I do that? Well, yeah, I don't know how to do that. Does anyone know how to do that?
I think there are little arrows down underneath.
Arrows.
Maybe you can go back.
Mm-hmm. Let me see.
See on the screen where it says slide 8 of 8 toward the bottom?
No. Oh, wait. Ah,
There you
okay.
go.
Okay.
Great.
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that. Oh my goodness.
And
Yes. And
yeah,
we do, no, we are going to send the slides to everybody. And then I also sent a resource list that we have for victims that has phone numbers for things, phone numbers and websites for things like IC3, credit, how to check your credit report, how to get a credit freeze going. We also have victim resources. There's a 24-hour victim helpline for any victim of crime, but that includes fraud victims. So if in the middle of the night they need some support, they can call that number. There's also several agencies out there working to help protect people who have sent images over the internet and need help getting those found and taken down. So I sent all those resources, so that should be sent to you guys at some point too.
thanks, Jen. We
Sure.
have a couple more minutes. There are two more questions that I can see on the chat.
Yeah.
One is, if you can't track the caller, is there still a way for older adults who were scammed to get their money back, such as through their banks, through this fraud specialist at their bank?
So realistically, victims of fraud do not typically get their money back. And that is what is incredibly hard about this victimization. We can talk to them about, sometimes if they've sent a gift card, we can put them in touch with the gift card company and they can call and see if there's any money left on the gift card. Usually scammers empty those pretty quickly. There's not a lot that can be done to get money back unless and until there's huge amounts of money stolen. However, there are lots of things and people who are doing a lot of work to try, especially with cryptocurrency. And then there's also a lot of bills and activity in Congress and the Senate and everything to try to close some loopholes for victims. And the other, not only do victims have money stolen from them, but then they also, unfortunately, also have a huge consequence tax-wise at the end of the year. People can claim gambling losses on their taxes, but not theft from fraud, which is a huge problem. So, yeah.
Thank you. Here's a very good question. When should someone make a report about a suspicious contact or an attempt at a scam, and when could it be ignored? Like, what level of seriousness what should be the tip off that should we report anything, or, it's like,
see, do whatever you're comfortable with. I mean, the thing is that if it's happening to you, it's probably happening to thousands and thousands of other people. And the more reports that an agency gets, the more they'll look into it. They can't address an issue that they don't know is a problem. So reporting to the Attorney General's office, reporting to law enforcement, that's how you get resources towards those problems. That's also how you know how big of a problem it is. So I say report away. Squeaky wheels come in handy. So
point. And then finally, I have, how involved is AARP with telephone companies in helping to stem scam calls and text messages?
We have a lot of resources on our website about spam calls, phishing calls, all of that stuff, and ways to fight that. We definitely do a lot of prevention work with people about how to know if it's a scam call. But there's also, we also support a lot of the technology that's coming out that kind of can try to prevent some of that. But also there's scams involved with scamming technology as well. So we can help kind of identify what are legitimate tools and what are people trying to get your money.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more
Yeah.
questions coming up.
Perfect. Well, if you guys have any other questions, my contact information is there. You can call us anytime. You can call the helpline. I want to thank all of you guys for everything that you do. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Jen. It was a good presentation. Scams are always interesting. So we appreciate that. Dana shared in the chat the links for the evals. If you guys could please fill those out while it's fresh in your mind, we appreciate that. Our next session is going to be Thursday afternoon at 1 p.m. on this same Zoom link. Please log in right before 1 o'clock so we can get started on time. I do want to remind people that certificates will go out after Thursday's training. And on June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And on our website, elderabuseprevention.info, we're going to have some stuff that you can share on your respective social medias to help spread the word for that. So without any further ado, are there any last minute questions? I see a bunch of stuff kind of in the chat. Everything's thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right. So we will see everybody 1 o'clock Thursday afternoon. Thank you all. All right, folks, welcome back. We got a few seconds until 2:50. Just some of you might have been monitoring the chat. Survey link has got some issues. Don't mind the 2025 date. It is for the 2026 eval. If you can't get it to work, we'll send some fixes out via email, but we do appreciate the feedback on those surveys. So as we get started here, we're going to be given a presentation by Deputy Attorney General Lisa Bogue. She's going to talk about the Domestic Abuse Homicide Review Panel and some of its reports, focusing on the elder population as both the victims and perpetrators of domestic abuse. Lisa, I hope you're still on, and I hope you can still share your screen, but go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yes, great.
Yep.
I will share my screen. Everyone seeing that?
I can still see you.
All right, well, let's try again.
There we go.
So I wanted to start by introducing myself. My name's Lisa Bogue. I am the chief of the criminal division at the Office of the Attorney General. But I did start, I'm a sort of lifelong prosecutor. I was a mid-coast prosecutor where I started as an assistant district attorney, where I had sort of a wide range of prosecutions from traffic court all the way up to vehicular manslaughters. At that time, I moved to the Attorney General's office and I worked in the healthcare crime unit where I had a little bit more of an opportunity to work with victims of elder crime. Anyone doesn't know, the healthcare crime unit does Medicare and Medicare fraud, but also in that capacity, we had an opportunity to look at some neglect cases in the prosecution setting of, say, a nursing home facility or a care provider who may have either physically or sexually abused a client or a patient. So I sort of started knowing a little bit about those types of cases in that prosecution in that capacity. I also did some drug prosecution work, and then went back to do some adult felony work, and then came to the AG's office to do homicide prosecution. But the really exciting part of my coming to this office was I was right when I started in 2019, I was selected to be the co-chair of the Domestic Homicide Review Panel. And probably many of you know here who do this work or are familiar with the work of the panel know that Lisa Marchese was a longtime champion of this work. She retired this past summer as the chief, but I would say I've had some pretty big shoes to fill in her capacity and the work that she did with this panel and sort of moving this panel along. I will note that Polly Campbell, looks like she's on this on this call or presentation or summit. And Polly has been a long time champion of that work too. And I've had the pleasure of working with Polly. So there were a lot of people before me that came and did this work. So I'm really proud and privileged to be able to step into it and be here talking to you all about it today. There's a link here that I put on this slide, but I'm also willing to share the AG's website, where you can see sort of the work of the Homicide Review Panel and this report that we're going to talk about today, as well as past reports, are available at that site so that you can go and look at them. This is the 15th, and so I think that that covers all of those past reports. The next slide, we're talking about the current membership. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about sort of our mission and the work that we do, but I think it's important to note the membership that we have. The point of it is to have a multidisciplinary group of people who are looking at the information, offering their thoughts and feedback. But as you can see from this first page, you have members of the Attorney General's office, you have judge, you have district attorney's office, you have people from the medical field, you have people from the domestic violence area. We have a member from the U.S. Attorney's office, someone from State Forensic Services, and then some law enforcement to include a chief of police, a detective lieutenant from the Sheriff's Department, the Commissioner of Department of Public Safety, and then someone from Victim Services at the Department of Corrections. So the panel came about back in October of 1997, and it was done by the legislature to have the commission establish a domestic abuse homicide review panel to look into the deaths of persons who were killed by a family or household member. And it mandated the panel to come together and think about ways to improve systems, to protect people, to talk about domestic violence specifically. We were to collect data, compile it, and meet and put out a report biannually. And I know the panel proudly, there are other panels like this who are sort of tasked with putting out these reports. And I think this panel would be proud to say that we have kept up with that requirement and are one of the few that are very good about putting together and putting out this report. The mission of the panel is to do a pretty in-depth case review, and I'll tell you a little bit what that looks like. So many of the people that you saw that are part of the panel appear, it used to be a lot more in person, but now with post-COVID, there's a lot more of remote participants, which is good because I think we get a pretty good full membership when we have a case. And what we do is we have a panel coordinator who selects a case, and we meet pretty much about 10 months out of the year. We meet one time a month, and at that meeting, a case or sometimes cases are selected to be reviewed by the panel. The person or persons who present that case are typically, if it's a prosecuted case, meaning a case that the person was charged and have made, basically we don't look at those cases till they've made their way completely through the court process. The lead detective, the prosecutor of the case, and the victim advocate that was assigned to the case will come to a meeting and put together a PowerPoint, and they'll go over quite in depth everything that was involved in the investigation of the case. After they're done with their presentation, the members of the panel will give feedback, have questions, interact with the presenters. But the bigger part of what we're doing as part of that conversation is making observations and potentially recommendations about that particular case, about that topic, about sometimes there's a very strong medical part of it. Sometimes there's more of a question about what's going on with law enforcement. Oftentimes we'll have children that are the victims of the crime, and on occasion, maybe a couple times throughout the year, we'll go with the child death panel, and we'll sort of have a much bigger group, and we'll look into the things involving a child death case. Again, during that time, all of the different disciplines are giving feedback and providing questions and making observations that are kept by the panel coordinator, and she's keeping a record of those things for the entire time. Ultimately, that's, as you can imagine, that's a lot of work over so if there's 20 meetings, so you'll have 20 different cases or 20 different sessions that are evaluated. And once that happens, then the next task will be for the panel to put together its report that we're going to go over here. And that really breaks down, we try to break that down into the different disciplines. So this particular report is broken down into the public awareness and advocacy organizations, the legal side of things, the DHHS or child protective section, healthcare, medical health, and substance use. And so each of those will divide all of the observation and recommendations into those sort of subcommittees, and they'll meet, you know, and draft and redraft and think and rethink what the observations and recommendations ought to be. And then what happens out of that, sort of the making of the sausage, is this report that we're about to sort of go through. This is a summary of the data for this particular review period that we just that we reviewed for this period. What you'll note is that the cases that we review are between 2021 and 2024, and there were 17 cases that were reviewed during that time period. And I would not say there's a real rhyme or reason to what cases, and the reason for that time span and that why we're looking at cases that might be 3 to 4 years old is cases take a while to get through the process. And so, like I said, a case doesn't get presented to the panel until it's sort of completed. And so the 17 cases are not necessarily like, they don't line up exactly with the year. You'll see that we're a little bit behind, and sometimes it stretches over 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 years. But if you look at the report that we looked at here, we're looking from 2023 and 2024. There were 53 homicides. 18 of those were from the mass shooting in Lewiston in 2023. 15 of those were domestic abuse homicides. In 2024, we had 34 homicides, and 15 of those were characterized as domestic abuse homicides. And then we also, just for reference, report on how many, as of November 2025, how many homicides we had during that year, and how many of those were domestic abuse homicides. We also talk about the percentage of those which are domestic abuse homicides. There were 28% of those during 2023. Obviously, that Lewiston shooting sort of kind of skews that number a little bit. So that's a very unusual happening for us. And then in 2024, 44% where those were domestic abuse homicides. These first few sections of the report are sort of pretty standard. They are just sort of looking at the data. Again, the number of cases, the time frame of cases that we looked at, and then what are some of the trending facts and things we learn about the homicides. And what you'll see here on this first page, or on this page, is the method of homicide. And you can see predominantly these crimes are committed with a firearm. I think that's a pretty consistent fact. If you were to go look at many of our reports, that's a pretty consistent method of homicide. So here you'll see that 50% of them were with a firearm, 20% were blunt force, 10% with a fentanyl, 5% was a shaking, 5% was a knife, and 5% was an arson, and 5% by strangulation. The next data we look at is the gender of the parties and the age of the parties that involved. So it's probably an area that will be of interest to the group. Of the 20 homicide victims, they were as young as 6 weeks old all the way up to 72 years old. Seven victims were 55 and older. And you can see those other numbers. And then the perpetrator's age also ranged from 19 years old to 76 years old. The top of the page talks about the gender. One of the other things we look at is we look at intimate partner homicides as well as intrafamiliar homicides. I think probably most people in the group know what that means, but intimate partner would be more like what I would say sort of that domestic violence partner or spouse. I think that's sort of the more traditional way that we think of domestic violence, but we also look at intrafamilial would be killing of a parent, a child, a sibling, or a family member. Further breaking that down and looking at breaking it down by the intimate partner violence homicide, you can see the numbers there. Again, heavy on the firearm, but also blunt force, and a knife and an arson as it relates to intimate partner violence. This next slide, we're talking about, again, intimate partner homicides by gender at the top of the page, offender and victim. You can see mostly male offenders and mostly female victims. The intrafamiliar homicide data, we're looking at, there were 8 perpetrators within that section, and there were 11 victims. In that area, we had 2 men killing brothers, 1 man killing a bystander and his parents, 2 fathers killing their sons, 2 mothers killing their sons, and 1 son killing his mother. The ages, again, in that particular area, this chart is showing ranged from the age of 21 to 42 years old, and the victims were 6 weeks old to 66 years old, highlighting that 4 of those victims were under the age of 2. Again, looking at the gender breakdown of those homicides. Throughout the report, we sort of have these sort of information boxes. Here, we're talking specifically about the impacts of domestic violence on children. Obviously, some of our cases, the victims themselves are children, but the presence of children is a clear aggravating factor in the work that we do. But one of the really important observations and recommendations we're going to talk about later on in the presentation is the financial impact of children, and some really good work that the panel and members of the panel have been part of in trying to help get financial support for children who are usually orphaned as a result of these homicides. Next, we're looking at, again, as part of our process, we're trying to see if any of these perpetrators or victims had involvement with available community services or other statuses of the perpetrators. You can see here, working with community-based advocacy groups. There was only 1. In the intrafamiliar, the DHHS involvement, there was 4. Probably that reflects that some of these families were involved with the department, where we see some of the child deaths. Was there a substance use involved in the cases? And did we see an example where a protection from abuse order was in effect? The next section talks about the status of perpetrators who committed homicides. Again, breaking them out by intimate partner violence and intrafamiliar homicide or violence. 6 were found guilty of murder or manslaughter. Same with the intrafamiliar violence, 1 murder, 5 manslaughters. Suicide with homicides were 4. And then we had 1 example of not criminally responsible finding. So we do see murder suicide cases, and we do try to look at those. Sometimes the number that we're able to look at depends on how many other homicides we have. I think we're looking to try to move towards maybe doing multiples of those cases at a time, just because unfortunately we don't have enough, months in our year to cover everything. And we really do want to try to look into some of the information in the murder suicide cases, because they can be really helpful to the work that we do.
Lisa, there is a question.
Okay.
It seems crazy that someone gets 4 years for murder. Is this typical?
So, not typical. And some people are charged with manslaughter, and I can give you an example of some of those manslaughters represent somewhat of unusual circumstances. For example, I don't know if that's the case cited in here, but we try to de-identify somewhat so that people don't necessarily know exactly what case we're talking about. But I can tell you in the manslaughter, there are cases where, for example, a child, we've had a sort of uptick in cases where children are exposed to fentanyl. And so in the scale and ways in which, a manslaughter conviction can be 0 to 30 years, and the 4 years that's 4 years to serve, which would mean they would have technically a larger sentence of say 15 years to serve. I'm sorry, a 15-year sentence, but it would be suspended but 4 years, and they would be placed on probation. Some of those are by agreement, and I can tell you some of those times our offices are recommending higher sentences, but given the person's circumstances and the court feeling like that was less of obviously not an intentional death, but a sort of a misfortune that would be either criminally negligent or reckless. And so the court would sort of evaluate their level, or what level is appropriate for a prison sentence to be less than others. So I would say a 4-year sentence when someone dies is not common, but I think and we've done a lot to sort of improve our numbers in that area. But we do see some sentences that are in that range. Again, when the court finds perhaps the culpability of that person is less than, say, what you might otherwise expect. I can't see comments, so I appreciate that, Polly. If somebody else has a question, they can, I'm happy to answer them.
It's my job, Lisa.
Oh,
today.
that's your job.
Yes.
So the next section, this is, I think, important, and I talk about it. So in my capacity, I've, talked to law enforcement, I talked to prosecutors. This is my first opportunity to speak to this group. But this area is just such an important thing for people to think about when they have a family member or someone in their life. These factors are things that we just see so often over and over in our cases, and sometimes people just aren't aware of that. So this is a section of I've seen in almost every single one of our reports, just letting people know how important it is to, if you're seeing this, and how often these things are unreported or undocumented. And then we see these cases in the homicide review panel, that how often these things are present in people's lives. I mean, people can look at that. I don't need to sort of read from the slide, but just that area is a really important sort of talking point, or things we like to talk about or share with people or get out in the world that you should recognize, or if you see that happening, how important it is to engage and be concerned. And I think another common talking point is understanding that these groups and support groups and hotlines and numbers are available for you as a family or friend to reach out, because you're seeing these things happen and you don't know what to do. I think sometimes we think, oh, I need to give that number to the person who might be suffering from these things, but really it's also super important if you are a family member of someone and you see these things going on, for you yourself to use those resources to see how you best can be a support to that person. These are just some other examples of things that we see within our work. the presence of physical abuse, emotional and verbal abuse, previous threats to kill, isolation, and substance use. So the next section of the report is organized by the topics that I mentioned before. Like, we'll look at the public awareness and advocacy organizations and what observations did they make within that topic, and what recommendations did they make. I'm kind of going to cruise through this section. Again, I will share the link so that people who want to go and look at all of the observations and all of the recommendations, but I did want to sort of focus on those things that might be more pertinent to the elder population. On the second to last bullet point is the murder-suicide. We see a lot of murder-suicides in sort of the older adult population. And you can see here, there's this question about whether there's a mutual plan that existed. It almost feels like sometimes this can be romanticized a little bit, like this was a mutual decision of their last, together, a decision that there might be a pact or something that together, something they've come to together. But it's really important that what we have seen and what we have reviewed, that it really is the male partner who is the person who seems to be deciding, and the person who is the perpetrator of the homicide. Part of the panel's work is, we hear about interviews of the family members and what was the dynamic like in the family, like prior to the murder-suicide. And you can really almost always see there is that power control dynamic. And so I think that's an important observation of the panel. And then that sort of gets to a recommendation. What you see in the work is there's an observation that's made from a particular case, and then we work to think about what would be a recommendation in connection with that. And in this one, you can see there's the second bullet point and the third bullet point really talking about, again, not romanticizing or minimizing or editorializing about what's going on. I mean, the true nature is this was an act of domestic violence where one person killed another person. So that's just a recommendation that came out of that particular area. The next area that we go into is the legal system. And within the legal system, we broke that down into several different areas, sort of the general legal areas, prosecution-based observation and recommendations, those that were specific to probation, bail and pretrial, firearms, the Sixth Amendment issues, and law enforcement. The area within this section that I think was important to talk about was bail and pretrial observations. The second bullet point that you see there talks about when a person is going to have to supervise a person on bail. I think what we were seeing and what we talked about in the panel was a defendant comes to court, an adult, and they represent that their adult or their parent is in a position to supervise or be responsible for them. And what we're finding is that that's really not true, that person has not been considered. And again, we can see how that might be a person, an elder parent who probably has no idea that that person is representing that they can stay at mom or dad's house, and that person's going to be responsible to make sure that they comply with all their conditions of bail and do everything that they're supposed to do. There was a very serious case that happened that was part of our work this this term and that person had not been consulted, or that person is feeling like they're being compelled to be that person, right? If your son is violent and dangerous and you say, please, mom, won't you tell everybody I can stay with you? That's not a good setup. So there is a procedure that can ask the judicial officer, meaning the court, to do a better evaluation. And there are examples where prosecutors and their victim advocates are doing the work to make sure that that person is not feeling coerced or even isn't aware that someone is representing that they would be in a position to supervise them or have them stay at their place if they were released on bail. The next area, I think everyone who knows much about what's going on with criminal work right now is there's a real shortage of defense attorneys to be able to represent defendants when they come to court. And I think as a prosecutor of these cases, of course, it's in everyone's best interest to have adequate representation for defendants. What our observation is that there wasn't really a way that the court was sort of prioritizing those appointments, meaning a person in a domestic, a person who's come into before the court in a domestic violence type case, the importance of getting that person representation as opposed to determining that they can be released. And so the recommendation would be that there should be a way for the court to do a more priority-based assessment, either by dangerousness or just knowing that those types of cases, it's very important for us to perhaps prioritize those types of cases for victim safety to make sure that those defendants have representation. The next area that was covered is the Department of Health and Human Services. Again, there was a lot of children who were exposed to fentanyl cases, and so those were part of our observations of that section. The ability to use well child visits and other processes to check in on children was part of some observations we made in that area. The next section we talked about was healthcare for mental health and substance use. If you look at the third bullet point in that observation, again, we're kind of going back to the murder-suicide area. Again, that those are gendered. It's female partner is killed by the male partner. Going back to whether there was some mutual plan or suicide pact. Really, it's really not the focus that we thought was more important for that. Again, observing the factor of a suicide, men who are suicidal, they're more likely than females to be suicidal, and then that puts them at risk to be homicidal as well. Sort of the last section in the observations and recommendation has to do with mental health and substance use. Important to know, and sort of probably known by most people in this field, that domestic violence is not mental illness. It's not that the complexities associated with mental health and treatment is important to be looking at. I would just maybe let people take a read of that section. You could see from the beginning of the data from this section in that we only had one case where not criminally responsible. I mean, that it was true mental illness that was involved in a homicide. So in all of the cases that were reviewed, the reality of a case that we saw an example of a mental illness that not excusably, but legally makes a person not responsible for their conduct was one in all of the cases that we saw. So I think that's a really important point, that while mental illness, versions of mental illness or versions of substance use do appear in our cases, that's not the basis or the reason or makes their conduct excusable. So I think that's a really important thing to think about or be aware of when we're looking at these cases. So as one of the, this particular report, each time we sort of do a dedication and we look at certain things, sort of a topic on our idea will sort of float to the top. In this particular one, it was prosecution and tools available to prosecutors. We also we dedicated to prosecutors and had sort of a shout out to Lisa Marchese, who had retired. But the tools available to us focused really on how we work together with, say, probation, or how I had spoke about the work that prosecutors can do when they're thinking about bail, and the conditions of bail and the most way to try to keep people safe on bail. In the area of getting restitution, the example I started to talk about where there is a way for you to get restitution for someone who's convicted where they've killed either a parent or both parents, or one parent has killed the other parent, but the ability to get restitution to help for the financial support of those children. So a lot of what the work we do and why we have someone from the Department of Corrections, members from law enforcement, prosecutors, we're able to sit around and think about and ways to try to help people sort of recover or do better. Like, obviously the work that we do is terrible, sad, and we're looking at homicides, and we're always constantly trying to evaluate the systems that we have, and are there ways and are there things that we can do to help people or help the survivors, or what signs were there out there before we started that maybe we could be looking at or looking a little deeper into in trying to help. Again, I call myself fairly new to the panel. I started on the panel in 2019, but a lot of the recommendations and the thoughts of this panel have made their way out and have done a lot to help people out in the world. Probably the biggest one I can think of is the mental health. The going through the medical field and being able to use, when someone goes in for either their well child or your visit, to be those sort of checklists are you feeling safe in your home, and using that as a way to check on people. One of the recommendations that came out of this panel is ways to make that system stronger. Are there ways that we can do better with that work to make sure that people are basically when they're in touch when they're in their medical appointment, are there ways that we can reach and sort of try and help them make connections and help them feel safer in their home? Polly.
Lisa, if I could just interject, because over and over again, we were having a recommendation that the healthcare system was failing victims. We at UNE, we developed a training curriculum specifically for healthcare providers, not just nurses or doctors. It's for medical assistants, nursing assistants, social workers, whoever works in the healthcare field. And the focus of this education, free one-day course, is on how do you assess and how do you intervene with patients so that we can do a better job of maybe preventing one of these homicides. Because we would see medical records when we could get them that the patients had been in to see somebody in an emergency room at their primary care, and nobody asked them anything about their what was going on in their life. And there's good ways to do it. So we have piloted that course. If you're interested in finding out more about it, you're welcome to email me.
Thank you. I did want to, I'm going to go a little bit to the appendix talks a little bit about some specific cases that I think are instructive, and I was going to sort of end with that. But before I did that, the 14th biennial report, and I will hold up the cover now. In this particular report, there was a section that was dedicated solely to observations related to abuse in later life, which I think is obviously a topic that all of you probably want to hear a little bit more about. One of the observations had to do with the responsibility to coordinate home care for aging parents, ill spouses and partners, and other older disabled family members. Whether provided by home health aides or family members, it typically falls on the shoulders of a family member. While there's a presumption that whoever is in the home or whoever lives nearby will provide the care, often at great personal expense. The AARP and National Alliance for Caregiving offer 1/3 of caregivers are 60 to 64 years old, and 7% of caregivers are 75 years or older. National and local efforts to increase availability of home care services and ease responsibilities of family caregivers are underway, but a lack of public awareness about the needs of person approaching the end of life and the needs of family caregivers continue to exist. In fact, the personal values of independence and self-reliance today's oldest generation may resist the help from non-family care services. And so we saw that in some of our cases, this sort of isolation of people, and that really makes it difficult to know if there is neglect happening or if, again, the dynamic of the power and control for the older generations. When I look at the observation we're talking about now kind of goes back to the male killing the female partner. I would say in my experience on this panel and my experience as a homicide prosecutor, that is probably where I do see sort of older suspects and older victims are in that murder-suicide. That is where we see it most typically. And some of our observations are like, what can we do to help understand that that's going on? One of the examples, for example, was people may go and check, but the mail answers the door, right? You're sending someone over because there's a well check or someone's concerned about a couple, and only the mail comes to the door, making sure and he'll be like, yeah, we're okay, or everybody's fine. Being sure to check on every person that's in the house and not just relying upon the word of sort of the more dominant person saying everybody's okay, everything's fine. That was one of the observations that we made in the case. This again starts talking about the presumption about whether there's some pact for which we have never really found there to be evidence that that's true, even though I think typically you hear people, they even use, there was a mercy killing or just like, again, romanticizing it. I don't know that any case that we looked at, did we find that to actually be true. Some of the recommendations that came out of that were to provide support and expand community-based programs to serve the needs of older adults who are homebound with health limitations and who are constrained by caregiver responsibilities. Many community-based programs function through volunteerism and private donations, and sources of stable funding are needed for sustainability. Also, a recommendation that came for this section would be a way to screen emotional distress and mental health conditions, including anxiety, depression, and suicide risk, that those ought to be incorporated in healthcare encounters with older adults and their caregivers. This type of screening could occur during home care visits or healthcare settings, and several standardized screening tools are available based on these results, and further evaluation and supportive treatment are warranted. Any questions? I did speed through a couple of areas, just because I didn't find any particular observations or recommendations that were related sort of specifically to this target group, but I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about any topics perhaps people might have before kind of moving to the homicides at the back. I see chat things happening.
There are no questions in chat right now.
Oh, okay. It looks like 7 chat, but no questions are there. Okay.
No.
All right. So looking at homicides from 2023, again, these involve murder, suicides, and domestic violence. and DV homicides. You can see down on 3/25/23, there was a 71-year-old victim and a 45-year-old suspect. On 4/28/23 in Bowdoin, that was a multiple victim homicide. I think that case also stresses, we talked a little bit about making sure we know placement when someone is released on bail. I think in that particular instance, that was an example of a defendant who was being released for one crime, and he was essentially sort of left to this family where he ended up, killing 4 people. We have talked about that, like what are the supports available to people, or the awareness or the ability for people to be checked on when, in this instance, when someone's released and they're not placed on probation, there really isn't a way for the Department of Corrections or for other people to sort of check on the safety of that placement when they go. There are certainly caseworkers at the prison that try to help people internally to set them up for success when they leave. But, what can be available to sort of check on that or make sure that the people sort of have a full understanding of what they're getting into when someone's released into their care after they've served a period of time in prison. This next section were a few homicides that happened in 2023. These have not yet been before the panel, but you can see there was one in Denmark that involved a 93-year-old victim, a 69-year-old victim, and the suspect was 53 years old. As well as there was a case over in Topsom in 2023 where the victim was 64 years old and the offender was 71 years old. the sort of isolation that happens for people. In my experience, a lot of these cases, that's what we're seeing. There's not the ability for support for people. Some of these were in very sort of remote areas, and we come to learn that they've sort of been able to separate them from other supportive family members, and there's neglect, and they're not being cared for and sort of forgotten. And so, what are the things that we can do, or how can we help support people in these situations so that they don't end up before the panel? These now moving to some cases that happened in 2024. We have seen a lot of cases where an adult child is taking advantage of an elder parent, either for financial gain, or they themselves are a drug user, and they end up being cut off financially, or not, a parent telling them no, and not being willing to continue to support them in the way that they want to be supported. And I've seen several homicide where that ends up in the person's death. And an observation that we often see is, what are other family members doing? And in some of these situations, it is that person is their only lifeline into the world, or their only sort of connection in the world, and they begin to rely upon them. And then again, we see that isolation happening to these folks. So, I'm sort of ending a little early in my presentation. Again, I would open it up to questions. The panel works pretty diligently in trying to present a full presentation to the panel, and then taking into account the different areas and observations of the different disciplines that come in. I consider myself kind of a newbie to this work, but it's certainly important work, and I really enjoy it. I've been a long time prosecutor, and have been in a situation where, I've prosecuted cases, prior to homicides, and now doing the homicide work. But I do think being able to sit on this panel really gives us an opportunity to look at really interesting, despite it being terribly sad work, but the interesting part and the things that we can do and the hope that we can give, and trying to evaluate and look at these and see where there are ways that we can make improvements. Generally, an example of a law enforcement improvement that I think is a really important, that I've seen come to work, where there's been sort of a model policy that came out of the Criminal Justice Academy, that if you are in a community where there was a domestic violence homicide and those parties had contact with local law enforcement, that local law enforcement is supposed to do something very similar to what we do in the panel, meaning members of their department, members of a local community-based domestic violence group, maybe the prosecutor's office, or sort of get together and sort of debrief, and almost do the same thing that we do in the panel. Like, were there missed opportunities for us with this family or with these people in our community that were sort of missed? And it really mandates them to sort of write a report, and to turn that report over to us, to the DA's office. I mean, not to the DA's office, sorry, to the homicide review panel, to see how were there missed opportunities within the community, or how can they do better? And I can tell you there was one instance where that happened, and that chief did that chief did the report, that chief provided some information and actually came to the panel, but they were able to convince their town that they really needed a domestic violence investigator within their department. It showed an example of, that person did have contact with law enforcement. And as someone who I know works with law enforcement, sometimes your regular patrol officer is, are you talking to me about a crime right now? Oh, you're not talking to me about a crime right now. I need to move on to my next call. But someone with domestic violence training and experience could know, like, this is sort of it's a cry for help, although it might not be a crime. It's a cry for help from that person, and recognizing that and trying to set them up with resources, or just the recommendation that people have specialized domestic violence investigators, I think Polly would say, is something that comes out in probably every single report we've ever put out. But I think that was a good example of how that instance in that community really highlighted the importance of having someone like that within your department, or sometimes they're associated with district attorney's offices, but how important having someone with eyes for that can be to help your community, or help your police department.
And they did end up hiring a
They-
domestic
yeah.
violence investigator.
They did. Yep.
Mm.
They did.
If I could
But-
just add a couple of things, Lisa. I want to emphasize again, I mean, you said this, but one of the things I really like about the panel is that we don't look for blame. What we're looking for is gaps in services, whether it's, could law enforcement have done something different? Could healthcare have done something differently? Mental health, whatever it might be, whatever it might be. That's what we're looking for. The other thing I really like about the panel is when the state police do these investigations in domestic homicides, they often will do what they can to learn more about the victim. They interview not just parties immediately involved, but they'll look at friends and family, people that the victim worked with. So we often really know that victim in a whole different way, is not just a murder victim, but as somebody who had a job and who had children and who was going to college, or whatever it might have been. Thank you for letting me interrupt.
I think, and that really goes to some of the observations and recommendations and ways, for example, are there ways, to help employers, the signs in their bathrooms, or what can we do with this? It was clear that this person's, colleagues at their work knew something was up and they didn't know what to do or how to move forward. So when Polly talks about how we do learn so much about what was going on, we call that victimology, kind of where I come from, and what was going on with that person, and where are the places where maybe we could lend a helping hand. And so that's absolutely true. And in some occasions we're looking at, are there failures? It's not a blame, as Polly would say, but were there failures of the systems that were there, and they didn't do everything they could do, and what was the consequence of that? So again, not a blame game, but just really an opportunity to dig into a case. We have a case that wasn't in this report that we just talked about recently that was just such an inspiration to me, and how the case was investigated and everything that law enforcement did in order to help get justice for that victim. And so that presentation, sometimes you'll see we'll put an applause in our report, because people have really gone above and beyond to do the work. In that particular case, it was, the looking of the victim after she was missing by the warden service, and the work of the Maine State Crime Lab, and all of the things that people did to sort of help get justice for that person. Unfortunately, it isn't always like, what could we have done better? But in this very unfortunate event, did we really see all of the different members of law enforcement and the community come together to get justice for a person that had been murdered. I'm super passionate about this work, and I really love it. And so anything I can learn to do to help do it better, or to help others do better, or perhaps now that I'm in the chief position, I kind of see how many of these cases are coming through our state in a year. And didn't I love that last year our numbers were down? So those are the types of things that we're hoping that this work makes it. I know it makes a difference. I know it makes a difference. And the more we can do to, see less of these homicides or to make something good come out of something that's so very bad is really inspiring to me. So.
Did you see Jill's question? I think you may have covered it somewhat. It's in the chat.
Can I open a chat?
It says, I may have missed it, but does the panel make recommendations about what specific services may be lacking and could have helped prevent the violence?
There are times where I think we do get that specific. Was there an like, for example, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say sort of mandated procedures that we see with law enforcement, or, like, did a person go to the district attorney's office and ask to have a case dropped? And when they did that, was there a real opportunity to sort of wrap that person in services? Did that happen? Did that not happen? So I do think there are instances where we do see really specific things that didn't happen. I think part of this panel, part of this report was, are there ways to help educate prosecutors and people's in district attorney's offices in order to help them understand the resources that could be available? Because sometimes prosecution can't happen. And so it happens a lot that prosecution can't happen because proving a case beyond a reasonable doubt can be difficult. And so when we know we can't prosecute and be successful in that way in every case, then what are we doing? Are we making sure that person's connected with a local community-based domestic violence advocacy group? Are we making sure maybe that person would go to, can we get the defendant into some sort of programming like the CDVIP? It was CBIP when I did it, and I know it's called something else now, but is there a way at least to get that person engaged in something when we may not end up with a conviction? So I think that was a long answer to, yeah, I think there are instances where we see really specific places where there were some cracks in our systems, and we make specific recommendations about how we can patch those up a bit.
There's another comment, but I think you could respond to this, Lisa. Linda, this is just a comment about the mental health system in Maine. If an individual is hospitalized involuntarily for the blue paper 5 days and is actually willing to accept inpatient care after that, there's often no bed available for them to be admitted into, so they are sent home, which could be a huge problem.
I think we, as a prosecutor, how much the criminal justice system is relied upon to sort of be a crutch to help a mental health system doesn't have enough resources. And sometimes that's good in that we can court order things to happen, or there can be instances where they sort of have to participate in that in order to, for example, there was a person who was a schizophrenic, and he got put on probation. And while he was on probation, he took his medication and he was healthy and he did what he should do. The second he got off probation, he wasn't doing that. I certainly see and understand where there's the mental health system is not all it can be, I guess is a fair way to say it. But so sometimes that work falls upon the criminal system to try to make up for where that system's lacking. There's a hand, I think, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. I help coordinate the Cabinet on Aging, and also in that role support the Elder Justice Coordinating Partnership. And I just did want to note one of the areas that we've been looking at is how can we look across these various mortality review teams, because there are several, and now just recently the legislature has passed the bill that will form a suicide mortality review team. And many of these, just as you've mentioned and why you're here, include older adults, and just trying to be sure, I think there's a real interest on our part in just trying to be sure that we review, understand, talk to each other about the recommendations that touch older adults, because I think so many of these groups, it's a subset of the overall work. So I
Right.
just wanted to sort of put that out there, that
Mhm.
we're sort of trying to work on how to do that and be sure that
Right.
when you make recommendations that touch older adults, they're getting to the appropriate place that they need to get to actually see the change. Because as you mentioned, all of this is really about using this information to prevent future harm. And so we just want to be sure. So it'll just be interesting, because I assume the suicide mortality review team, when that's set up, will have some intersection with the work you do. As you've mentioned, several of these are crossover. So just trying to figure that out. Some more to come, and I'll probably be reaching out to you at some point.
Okay.
So thank you for your work that you do. Very
You're welcome.
important.
I'm going to try to put the link. There it is in the chat. That you can see this report in its entirety is there. And then some of the other reports are there for anyone who's interested in looking at the reports going back.
It really is fascinating reading. And I think the observations and recommendations will get you thinking about your own work.
So Lisa, thank you very much. I know you got to run to court like in a few minutes. I
Right.
do appreciate you presenting, and these in Polly for chiming in because of your role on the panel. These are important. It's good to know that all levels are looking at what they're doing to try to make it better. So I do appreciate your time here spent today. For
Thank
everyone else, we're going to close this up. There is a survey link in the chat. Please try to do that. If you can't do it now, we'll email the links out. Try to do that. We're looking for future training topics, how to make our training better, like we just talked about, how to make things better. We do have our roundtable coming up in the fall. We also have a really important date, June 15th, which is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And there's going to be a lot of social media stuff that you can share on your respective pages on our website, the main Council for Elder Abuse Prevention's website. That is elderabuseprevention.info. If you go to that, you can follow the links. You can get to some of that social media to share it on June 15th. Again, I want to thank all the presenters today. I want to thank my fellow council officers, especially Jill Randall, and also Maine Credit Union for their technical support today. Don't forget, email Jill if you need legal credit for this. And Jill is also going to be having someone email out the certificates of attendance. With that, are there any questions for us or any officers? All right, not seeing any. Thank you all very much. Council officers, if you could, I think we'll either stay on the line here or we'll get a new link just to do a quick AAR recap of this. But everyone else, thank you and have a great day.